Warning! Warning!
Today's episode contains spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie or TV show that we are talking about, we highly recommend that you watch it first, then listen to this episode. Thank you. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of The East Meets the West, the first episode of 2021. I am your host, Rigor. Joining me, of course, is my co-host, Patsy the Angry Nerd. Did you survive the holidays, Pat?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. We didn't do a whole lot. Stayed home for the most part. Did a little version of drive-by Christmas where we kind of stand outside and don't really see anybody, but it's a little weird, but hopefully things can get back to some sense of normalcy this year, although if the first week is any indication, I don't know.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, my Christmas was very low-key as well, so it was good. My son gave me this cool bat signal light. It's heavy, too. It's probably about 4 inches tall, and it looks like, a spotlight, a giant spotlight, but it's tiny. But when you turn it on, it shines the bat signal on the ceiling. It's just so cool.
Oh, I've seen those. Those are pretty cool.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have gone out and bought it for myself, but he gave it to me as a gift, and I love it.
Yeah, it's funny how that works when you get these things that you're like, oh, I wouldn't buy this for me, but if somebody else buys it for me, like, that's great. Like, that's
right. So, all right, today's lineup of films are as follows. We are going to discuss the Shaw Brothers film Life Gamble from 1979 and the spaghetti western Day of Anger from 1967. Now, for those of you who are new listeners to the show, the Shaw Brothers is a Hong Kong-based production studio that's been around since the 1920s. They've produced all kinds of movies, from drama to romance to horror, even a spaghetti western or two, but it was the kung fu movies that put them on the map worldwide, and they produced hundreds of them from the late 60s to the mid-80s, and that's what we're covering here. As we've been venturing into the Shaw Brothers kung fu films, we found that the ones that have really interested us so far are the films starring a group of actors known as the Venom Mob, or Five Weapons Guys. There are actually 6 actors in the group, and they all first acted together in The Five Deadly Venoms in 1978, which was a huge international hit. They were the main choreographers in all of their films. They're all highly skilled Chinese weapons experts, talented actors, and amazing acrobats. Their films usually dealt with director Chang Cheh's common themes of brotherhood, valor, and betrayal. So, Life Gamble is the 4th film in the list of the 19 Venom Mob films. Prior to this were the films Five Deadly Venoms, Invincible Shaolin, and Crippled Avengers, which we've already covered on this show, so if you haven't had a chance, you can check them out on, I think they're on Amazon Prime as of this recording, and then go back and listen to those episodes as well. Now, due to limited availability of some of the movies, we jumped around a bit the last episode or two, but now we have almost all the films, and we're going to attempt to continue the rest of our analysis of the Venom Mob in theatrical order. So the basic plot is this. A kung fu blacksmith takes on 4 famous robbers while a villainous gambling boss plots to destroy them all. Now here's a little bit more of a detailed version of the plot. Life Gamble is a complicated story about a piece of jade called the Huan jade, which was originally stolen by four thieves. Since they can't decide who should get to keep it, the four agree to let habitual gambler named Mao Kai-yan, known as the Golden Lion, preside over a game of chance that will determine who gets it. Mao has an arrogant anti-hero bodyguard named Yun Zhang, a knife-throwing expert. Various individuals want the jade from Mao Kai-yan for their own purposes, either to get rich or to return it to its owner. Particularly the con woman Peng Shuang and her hired help, who wants to get into the gambling game Mo Junfeng's small hotel, along with Zhao Kang and her hired help Zhao Tang, aka Deadly Whip or Whipper Tang, as well as the handless, off-and-on villain Yan Zifei. Now previously, Zhao Kang and Zhao Tang offered a duel to Yan Zifei to defeat his new sword technique, and if he lost, he would lose his hand. Ultimately, he loses the fight. The sword was made by the blacksmith Xu Yu, who formerly made weapons for kung fu experts, with his only payment being that for every expert to teach him his kung fu style. And therefore, Xu Yu himself is an expert at various forms of kung fu. However, when Yan Zifei turned on him and tried to kill him, Xu fled and retired from making weapons. From here, it becomes an intricate and complex tale as characters betray other characters, often switching sides. Xu Yu is reluctantly brought out of retirement to help retrieve the jade and restore it to its rightful owner. Mo Junfeng, also a knife-throwing expert, gets involved because he had a previous relationship with Peng Shuang. Xu Yu agrees to make Yan Zifei a cool iron hand that can shoot darts if he agrees to change his ways. A police captain and his daughter, Zhao Hong, arrive to locate the jade, and Zhao goes undercover as a maid in Mao Kai-yan's house, capturing the attention of Yun Zhang, which gets him to think about changing his lifestyle. Through a series of backstabbing, both literal and figurative, the characters converge at the main game to see who can win the jade back. After it is decided, the story continues on as the jade is moved from one person to another, and it becomes an ultimate showdown as to who will truly retrieve the jade and restore it to its rightful owner. So, what did you think of this movie, Pat?
I thought there was a lot of really good fight choreography, as we've come to expect from Shaw Brothers films, and I thought there was some interesting intrigue. It was, for a while I was kind of like, oh, like let's get to some action, like let's move this along a little bit, because there was, for me, I wasn't overly compelled by the characters. I know it's the same actors we've seen over and over again, but it just kind of, it seemed to go a little slower than some of their other films. And I will say, though, that the intermittent action that they did throw in definitely keeps your interest. But I didn't really care for most of the characters. I thought they were kind of dull, and like there were some things that really didn't make sense. Like when the I'm gonna mess everybody's names up. So when the blacksmith fought against the dude with the iron skin there, and like they both finished by punching each other, like their hands clashed, and they would just both start laughing and then just walk away, and it's like, wait, what? Like what? Like,
I know.
Like they were definitely. I will say this about the dialogue as well. It was poorly dubbed in this one, because somebody would say something, they'd be like, well, I think I will go over there. And it's like, wow, this is like, I think my main issue is I'm so used to high quality from these types of films, from these Shaw Brothers films, and this one, it just wasn't up to those same standards.
I agree with you. I felt the movie to be like convoluted, way too complicated, too many characters. I did enjoy it, like in the way you said. While the characters weren't very compelling, the action was really good. But it did feel like that the whole first hour was set up, And then the last 40 minutes was the payoff, and the last 40 minutes was decent actually. Once they got to the game, then it really held my attention. But I have to admit, it was kind of losing me there for a while.
I ended up watching it on 1.5 speed. I had it on double for a while, and I was like, no, this is too much. But I put it on 1.5 speed because just like, and even that didn't help the dialogue. Like those pauses were just, it was too much. Because I know we've talked about this in the past, where it's like some of the voices, it's like, wow, you have this huge like ripped guy, and he's got like this high pitched like Pee Wee Herman / Gilbert Gottfried voice. But in this one, the voices matched, but like the voice acting was awful. It's
yeah.
like,
It's typical too of the times because there were a lot of other kung fu movies like that. That's one thing I did notice about the voices is it was the stereotypical. Wait, I shall now fight you, you bad guy. It was like that kind of thing that's gotten into the pop culture as a stereotype, and that's exactly how this movie was.
Yeah, and the other movies haven't been like this. I will also say that like 71% of the dialogue was the phrase "the jade."
Yeah.
What will you do with the jade? I will take the jade.
I will bring the jade to the house.
It's like, oh my god! Like there was one thing at the end. It's like, you will give me the jade, and I will take the jade, and the jade will be mine in my possession. And it's like, oh my god! You couldn't have found like any better way to say that,
right? I did find. I think you and I both watched the same version, and the subtitle tracks. The first subtitle track, it only just put the name of the character above them when they first appeared. So I thought that was kind of helpful for me to pay attention to who was who.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had the regular subtitles on at one point, and they just didn't match at all. They just, whatever they were saying in the subtitles wasn't what they were saying out of their lips, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I shut it off.
Yeah, I didn't put on the subtitles because I like to really get immersed in the storytelling, because I've really enjoyed most of these movies.
Yeah.
But I think this is the first one that I was just kind of like,
yeah.
Which was what we dealt with the Return of Ringo. I was just kind of like, like,
right.
it's when you're accustomed to something, and then all of a sudden the quality becomes like so different, and everything is. I kind of liken this to The Last Jedi, where it's like, okay, I know these characters, I know how these guys act, I know these actors, I know this type of storytelling, I really enjoy it, and then you get to it, and it's just like, this is not remotely close to what I'm accustomed to, and it's jarring to the point of almost disinterest. I mean,
right.
I don't think there's going to be a Shaw Brothers film that I am disinterested in, because I'm really enjoying, especially like you said, the Venom Mob. They were my number one characters for 2020. When my wife and I did our live Throwdown Thursday show, like that was.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I had them at the top of my list. I watched almost 400 movies last year, and these guys were at the top of my list. And I was just like, I was blown away. I'm like, these are such great actors. And I know they're different characters every time. So, I'm using the term character generically. But it's, the same 5 to 6 actors playing different characters. I really like their acting style, the chemistry that they have. And this one, I didn't feel any of that. And even some of the scenes were a little off. Like when the blacksmith guy there is fixing the axle on the wagon, and the girl kind of like sneaks up behind him. Like, I thought he punched her in the face because of the sound effect that they used. It's like,
that's funny.
I'm like, what? It's like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to punch you in the face. I thought you were a bandit. Like,
now, one thing to keep in mind is Masked Avengers and Kid with the Golden Arm they were made after this movie. And so this, like I said, this was sort of the fourth in the sequence of when they made the films. And I noticed that it was definitely different style for Chang-Chi than any of the films that we've seen so far. But I think it is kind of safe to say that he does change his style up often. We've noticed he can do like a funnier movie and then a darker movie. But this one just looked different. The characters, the costumes, at least everybody looked different from each other, which was good. So it wasn't difficult to discern who was who.
Right, you don't
they
have
all had
everybody with the
different
same
hair and stuff.
hairstyle and the same clothes.
But yeah, exactly. But what he had done was up to this point, he'd been doing this since the '60s, and he made stars out of people like Jimmy Wang Yu, T. Lung, and David Chang, and of course Alexander Fusheng, who was in this movie. I think he was, yes, Alexander Fusheng was the Mao's bodyguard, the kid that he took in because he was poor and he could throw the knives as well as like the hilt of his knives.
Yep.
And he was a huge star, I guess, back then. This is the first time I've ever seen him, or at least I remember seeing him. In fact, I thought he looked a little less Asian than everybody else in the movie.
I thought, you know what he looked like? He looked like, somebody you would find in like a 60s rock band.
Yeah.
Like, take the makeup off Paul Stanley and there he is.
That's exactly right. That's so funny.
I was going to say, to kind of touch on your point about how it looked different, the camera movement in the first fight we see where, what's his name, the blacksmith is betrayed by the guy with the sword that he made for him.
Right.
The camera movement was much different. Not that fight, the fight with the kid with the whip.
Right, yeah.
The camera movement was much different. Like, it wasn't like shaky cam, but like it moved with the action as opposed to like having stationary cameras just kind of, cutting back and forth, which
Right.
I thought was
Yeah, I
a
did
nice
notice
touch. I liked that. So like
Yeah.
as the fight moves, across this, set that they're doing battle upon, they just take the camera, and there was some excellent fight choreography as always.
And you could totally see the action, too.
Yeah.
That's
didn't
one
cut
thing
away.
Chang-Chi's been good about is showing you, and you pointed this out a couple episodes ago, is he shows you, he follows the sword down to the ground and then back up again, for example.
Yeah, it's great fight choreography as well as cinematography, because you're getting to see all of this. And I don't know a whole lot about the personal life of the director, but I would imagine that if he didn't have any fight training, that after working with these guys and filming these movies over and over again, he kind of started to know what to expect. Or they told him, they were like, hey, because this happens a lot in action films. It's like, hey, what if we did this? Follow the sword, follow this. Like, we're going to be doing these moves, and you watch the choreography over and over again. Maybe it inspired him, or it's like, oh, what if I did this and we had this shot? Like, that would just be so awesome.
Yeah, I highly recommend if you get a chance to go and watch the one that I covered on the first episode, which was the 5 Deadly Venoms. It's the one that started it all, because that's even a different style than we've seen so far, and it's really good. It's much better than this film. This film was, I would dare to say that it was mediocre at best. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either.
Okay. I mean, I definitely want to keep watching these, because I don't want to say thoroughly enjoyed all of them, because I really didn't like this one all that much. This is probably my lowest rating one. But you can't beat the fight choreography.
Right, or the skill. I was so upset when Chang Cheng, the deadly whip there, died so early in the movie.
Yeah, I was like, what is this?
I was bummed.
Like this, and again, this kind of touches back on what you were talking about with its, this convoluted plot, where it's like you have this guy who's immensely skilled, and then, like, that's how he dies.
Right.
That's what you get for thinking with your whip.
I love, though, how they always give him the unique weapon. the actor. He's always got something. He doesn't just have a sword. He's got to have a whip or a pole or a chain that extends out or something.
I was going to touch on that because I was going to say that every movie somebody's got. It's not just like, oh, here's, Jerry with his sword. He's always got his, like Rambo with his M60. Like, he's always got the same gun every time. But, now
right.
You see these guys and they show how skilled they are because they're all using different weapons. It sort of reminds me of the scene from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon between Zi Zhang and Michelle Yeoh when they're fighting in the dojo, and like Michelle Yeoh just keeps grabbing different weapons off the wall, and has no drop in skill with any of them, except when she picks up like this big. I'm not even sure what to call it. It's like a pole with like a really huge like club at the end of it. And, like, she goes to use it, but it's too heavy, and it kind of just, like, the end falls to the floor, so she has to grab something else.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that. I'm going to have to go and watch that one again, too.
Yeah, it's like, I've only seen that once, but that scene stuck out to me because of the, variety of weaponry. And it's like, yeah, filming a great sword fighting scene is exciting, but filming a scene with, like, the 3-section staff or, a spear or, any other, like the one we saw in this fight with the flags and the nunchucks. It's like,
yeah,
like you're fighting guys with flags, like, and you lost. Like, they go through this whole thing and it's like, oh, he's an expert at this and, this, and he knows how to do this and that and this. Like, so, whatever you do, don't, like, let him see you coming. And it's like he got defeated by the high school color guard. Like,
right. That was really amazing. I did not expect that. Although I felt that scene with the flags, I felt like I had seen that before. And I'm wondering if as a kid I caught it on like one of the Kung Fu theaters late at night. Because I remembered that all of a sudden. But, I don't know, but yeah, using the flags, I thought it was ingenious, and it was surprising how it worked. Because you could use them as whips, if you rolled them up, you could just, stop the knife from flying through the air, smother the guy.
And it was visually, it was a great choice because it just looked so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the cast here a little bit, and then we can talk more about the nuts and bolts there. So as we mentioned before, Alexander Fusheng played young Zhang, and he made 23 films with Chang Che. Now, this guy suffered a series of injuries in 78 and 79. On the set of a movie called The Deadly Breaking Sword, a wire suspending him snapped, and he fell 8 feet and landed on his head. And then while working on a movie called Heroes Shed No Tears, he shattered bones in his right leg. Ugh. So he had a hard time of it, even though he was a major star. He was rumored to star in Snake in the Eagle's Shadow, but Jackie Chan was eventually cast in the role. And then on July 7th, 1983, Fusheng died as a result of an automobile accident. And at the time, he was filming the 8-diagram pole fighter, in which he was to be the hero. So the film, they ended up rewriting it, and the remainder of the film was shot. And in the finished film, his character just sort of disappears, and the focus was put on Gordon Liu's character, who's in that movie. So I just thought that was interesting that this guy, too bad he had a promising career, and just seemed like one bad luck thing after another for him till the end.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Again, you mentioned Jackie Chan. Like, that's a guy who suffered a series of injuries throughout his entire career. Like, that guy's always getting jacked up.
Oh, yeah.
And it just goes to show that, it wasn't the on-set stuff that did him in. It was just, an everyday occurrence that could happen to anybody.
Yeah, so that was too bad. I did like, though, how he, in the movie, his character, he flips his daggers like a gunfighter would flip their guns before putting them in the holster. I loved that element of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely got that that vibe from him.
Yeah, I guess Chang Che is a huge spaghetti western fan. So he did. That's why these movies seem to be so similar, is because he always incorporated elements of spaghetti westerns in his movies.
Yeah, I was gonna say these definitely seem like kung fu westerns. Like that's 100% how I've like described them to people and viewed them myself. It's like that's what they are. They're kung fu westerns.
Yeah, exactly. So then we've got Ku Choi, who is also known as Philip Kwok, or Jared Padalecki's Asian cousin. He plays Shu Shi Yu. This was a hard one to pronounce because it's Qiuzi, but that's pronounced Shushi. It took me like till halfway through the movie to figure out who they were referring to and how to pronounce his name. So he's basically the retired badass who has long since given up his killing ways and retired to become a blacksmith that only makes tools. But once again, he's just steals the movie. I think his character is just so badass.
Oh yeah, like he's so stoic, and it's almost like the warrior monk type character. Like David Carradine in Kung Fu. This, stoic, like, I don't want to fight. And, like, which is why, like, the whole time he's like, I don't want to fight, I'm not making weapons. And he's so adamant. And, like, the first time the dude with the iron skin shows up, like, they get into a brawl. It's like, I'm not going to fight, and he's, like, using weapons. And
right.
It's like, wait, I thought what? You dropped your principles like fairly quickly here.
Well, even then, like, he didn't want to get involved, and then the police officer, or what was it, Nan? That guy Nan comes up and says, "Hey, I'm the owner of the jade, and it was stolen from me, and can you get it back for me?" He's like, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, what?
I couldn't tell they were saying Nan. I thought they were saying man with an M, and I'm like his name is Mr. Man. It's like, it sounds like something you'd say to your cat when you're scolding them. It's like, oh, you better knock it off there, Mr. Man. And then I realized they were saying Nan. I'm like, all right, that's way better. I just thought it might have been like a weird translation thing.
Yeah, no, that's it came up on the subtitle thing at the top. Now, there's a funny one that I'll get to in a little bit. So we've got Wang Lung Wei, also known as Johnny Wang. He plays the gambler, the Golden Lion, Mao Kai Yuan. And he was in over 80 kung fu films, including The Five Deadly Venoms. And Patsy, you will remember him as Iron Robe in The Kid with the Golden Arm. Which we talked about in episode
Iron
4.
Robe. The least comfortable thing to put on after a bath.
Yeah. Or don't go in the water with it because you'll rust.
Oh no, my amazing garment that I'm known for is rusted. I'm known as Rusty Robe.
That'd be a funny scene to see Iron Robe fighting, and then it starts to rain, and he ends up like the Tin Woodsman, where he just can't move.
That would be great. Ha! Curses.
Oil! Bring me oil! So real quickly here, we've got Ku Feng, who was the Chief Constable Zhao Zhijing, the police, also called the police captain. Kara Hui Ying Hung was Zhao Hong, his daughter. As we mentioned before, Chang Sheng was Zhao Tang, the deadly whip. Shirley Yu played Peng Shuang. Lu Feng played Yan Zifei, the guy who loses his hand. Lo Mang was Mo Jun Feng, swordsman. They called him a swordsman. This is what I was going to bring up. I said I would mention later. He never had a sword. He only had knives. I don't understand why he's listed as swordsman, and everywhere I've looked it up, his character is called the swordsman. But he didn't once use a sword.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is knifesman a thing?
I don't think so. Knife guy. I guess swordsman sounds more, intimidating than knife guy or knife man.
I mean, that's the closest you come. Like, they're like little swords.
Right. So that was interesting. And he, of course, was Golden Arm in The Kid with the Golden Arm. Or he was Golden Arms in The Kid with the Golden Arm.
I think he's my favorite.
Yeah. That's cool, yeah. I like him. Like I said before, Chang Sheng is my favorite. Even though Philip Kwok steals the show all the time. But it's too easy to make Philip Kwok a favorite, you know what I mean? It's like, because he's obviously so awesome.
Right.
Then we've got Lee Yin Min played Master Nan. Lin Chen Chi was Zhao Kang, and Liu Hu Ling was Zhen Lui Zhang, also known as the Golden Hairpin, which I think she was the character they called Smiley. Wasn't Smiley the one that had the hairpins that she was always stabbing people with?
Yeah, on her ring.
Yes, yeah. Which somehow comes out of the ring. I didn't get that.
Yeah, like that was, and that was another part of the movie that I was kind of like, what is this about? Like, because the first time they show like I don't want to call it an acupuncture dummy, but like the pressure points.
Right.
When she
yes.
like stabs this guy, and it's like, oh, here's his pressure point, and like this is where she stabbed him. It's like, I didn't need the dummy to know where she stabbed him.
Right.
Like, I didn't get, because they introduced that with no context. And they show it three or four times until they finally explain, like, oh yeah, he knows all the pressure points. It's like, that would have been nice to know prior to seeing that. Like, why am I seeing this? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
And that came up, too, where she does use the vital points that came out. It showed she used the Feng Chi vital point. That came up on the subtitle. And then when Zhu comes in and he finds the guy, Mo, on the knocked out, he uses the Earn Mung vital point to wake him up.
See, I thought he was dead. I thought she stabbed him and killed him. It's like, oh, this is an instant death. Because she stabbed him at, like, the base of his skull, like, right where his spine reaches his skull. So I'm like, oh, he's dead. It's like,
did she stab him or did she poke him with her finger?
Oh, she got him with the ring, I thought.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah,
all right, so that guy's dead. It's like, no, he is not dead. Watch. And he, like, touches his jaw and he wakes up. It's like, oh, I'm good as new again. This is awesome.
I know all about the vital points, too.
It's like, what? I'm so confused. Why is he walking around?
This movie was so confusing, and you know what made it even worse was everywhere I looked, the plot synopses were all different, and if half of them weren't even what the movie was about. I even have a book about martial arts movies from the 70s, and I'm reading it going, this is absolutely nothing like the plot. What movie did I watch?
Although I will say that, unlike Masked Avengers, this one, the title actually fits.
Yes, Life Gamble, yeah. Which that was kind of silly too. If we could jump around here. When we jumped ahead to the game, it's basically the Mao has this giant boggle thing. He shakes around one die and rolls it, and then that's it, and then the game's over. It's like, what? Yeah. Wait a minute.
I mean, like, they set that up fairly well. Like, they showed him cheating with it earlier.
Right.
So at least we knew that was a thing.
But it wasn't much of a game of chance. It was like, I mean, yeah, all right, it was a game of chance, but I mean, it wasn't, you roll the die once and then that's it. I expected a little bit more, like a roulette wheel or, a card game or something just that takes a little bit longer to develop tension. And this was just, okay, shake the thing, the boggle thing, and then here comes the die. Oh, you lose. Yeah.
Well, here's my question. The whole plan falls apart because he set it up so that it would land on the tiger every time. What if somebody bet on the tiger?
Right.
Like, then it just throws his whole plan out.
That's true.
They helped him out. They're like, oh yeah, we both bet on the exact same thing, so if we win, we'll split it. It's like, why would you do that? Are you going to crack it in half? Like, what is...
No kidding.
Like, you have 6
odds
different
are better
things
if you pick different ones.
I also thought it was a little excessive for them to be like, okay, what are you going to bet on? It's like, oh, I'm going to bet on this one. And they, like, drive a spear through the table just to, like, illustrate their point. It's like, wait. Did you have to, like, stab the thing? Or could you just say, oh, give me 37? Like,
I know. Like, the velour covering of the table, it's expensive to repair, to replace. And what was that weapon? There was 2 weapons there. Okay, so you get the one that you just mentioned, they stabs. It's got a big ball. It's like a club with a big ball at the end and then a spike on top.
Yeah.
Was that a mace or what the heck was that thing?
I'm guessing that was a mace. Like, I was more interested in, what's his name there with the Guy who looked like a sign spinner.
Yeah, I thought it was a skateboard.
It's like, what? It's like, oh, is your like electronics store closing, or are you having a sale on pens? Like, what's going on? Like, because they spun around, like those guys that hold like the big spinning things outside of stores.
Like, what's that commercial for? I can't think of the name now. Was it the insurance company? I think, and it's like,
Geico.
Yeah, Geico, and the guy's going to sleep on the couch with his sign.
Yeah, it's like that's what it reminded me of, because they spun around, and it's like, is that practical?
Right.
I mean, it must be, because he stabbed a guy and killed him with it.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it looked like a bladed skateboard that he could, stab people, then throw it on the ground and jump on it and take off,
Yeah, it's like a homicidal Tony Hawk.
Right. So now it's funny. I don't know if you noticed in the research that both Wikipedia and the Hong Kong Movie Base said that this movie was released in '79, but IMDb listed as '78. So when I dug a little deeper, it did premiere in '78 in Taiwan, but the official Hong Kong release was in '79. If anybody out there really cares, I just thought it was confusing when I went to look up the year, and I was like, wait a minute, that wasn't what I just saw. So, yeah, I just thought it was...
I only saw 78.
Okay. Yeah. So technically, yes, it was 78, but the official release was 79, which I don't think it was released here. I didn't see a U.S. release. It was Taiwan, Hong Kong, and I don't know, West Germany or something. But yeah, this movie was just way too complicated than it needed to be. And then at the end, they play the game, and then one guy kills the other guy, so they have to play it again to see who wins. And then the jade gets out, and then it just keeps going on and on. Like, even after Mao is killed, it just kept going on with the whole Nan thing with the army. Which, don't get me wrong, that was a great scene, but they could have ended it 20 minutes earlier than they did.
Yeah, they're like, oh, this guy gave us... Yeah, and again, that it emphasizes your point on it being convoluted. Oh, bring me this jade. Okay, here you go. Here's the jade. Thank you. All right, everyone. Now, my 65 guys are going to try to kill you because you did exactly what I asked you to. It's like, wait, what? Why? Like, there were no other stakes. There was nothing else going on.
Right, exactly. He had no reason to kill him.
What is the point of trying to kill this guy?
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you noticed, and of course, we're going to spoil this right here now, but it's Shu Shi, Philip Kwok's character. He gets 3 arrows in the stomach and continues fighting for a while, and I'm watching it going, I don't think he's got any plot information. He's not going to last very long. And sure enough, he croaks. He didn't last very long.
Yeah, it's funny because they're like, oh, he like does, he touches all his pressure points in the stomach. They're like, oh, you stopped yourself from bleeding, but you can't keep it forever. He's like, yeah, but I can still kill you. It's like,
right. Oh man! Which, by the way, I found in my notes the using of the flags is called cloth foo, and in cloth foo the flags can ensnare its target with ease, and the flagpoles end with razor sharp blades, which that was kind of cool.
I just want to know, like, you have the four guys with the different colored flags that have huge flags, and then you got Nan with like the little yellow flags, like he's directing planes off a runway. I mean, that's kind of what he was doing, because as he's like waving the flags around, like he's performing semaphore. He's like,
right.
He's like, yes, attack him and do this and go over here and now it's like, are you calling plays in from the sideline? Like, what's going on?
Right.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. We have very active lifestyles. It's not all wandering the countryside aimlessly or scaring passing motorists. And we all love a good cup of joe. And there's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. Bold, robust, delicious.
It was also a lot louder, and it didn't have as much power because there wasn't enough build-up from because when the way it works is that the firing pin strikes the back of the shell, which drives the bullet forward. So, like, it sparks the gunpowder, which propels it down, and the longer it's in a barrel, the faster the projectile is going to be. So if you cut that off, it also reduces accuracy.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Hear your host, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classic and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit monsterkidradio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to the discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, Classic Monsters, Modern Talk, and the Head of Rondo Hatton. Only on Monster Kids Radio.
One thing I liked about the movie too is that, like, the sets looked good, as they generally do in these movies. But you could tell that it had been repurposed from other films, or maybe it will have, since we watched some that took place later, or were made later. I think even one of these main sets, well after the studio had been closed, they Quentin Tarantino used it for what was that scene in Kill Bill with the snow, I think,
With Oren Ishii.
Yes, yeah. I think he used the actual Shaw Brothers set for that. And there was one moment in this movie. Yeah.
I was going to say, this set, I liked it. I liked it a lot. Like, the different set pieces that they had. You didn't need huge areas. Because
Right.
most of the action, and even, well, I say action, but most of everything took place with, just a couple of characters talking to each other. So there was a lot of intimacy in the scenes. It's taking place in the blacksmith shop around the anvil, or it's, just outside the blacksmith shop, or it's in the hotel room, or it's in, this. So, like, I don't think that, like, the biggest, most extravagant set was the one that you're referring to. Where
Yes, yeah.
they had the big fight that I was talking about earlier, and then
yeah.
Being outside, at the end. But I mean, like,
Yes.
there wasn't a set; they were just outside. Like,
I know. At least they went outside for, like, to do an actual fight scene. Whereas, what was it? Was it Golden Arms? Oh no, Masked Avengers, where they went outside for like a minute just to talk, and that was it.
yeah. Well, I think that's because they had to do a lot more wire work for that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And it's just easier inside. I mean, I liked this final fight. This was one of the better ones.
Oh yeah, it was so good. The one thing too about the sets is that I noticed. I have a feeling, and I haven't looked this up, but I have a feeling that this is around the time where Chang Che, the director, was still getting a bigger budget for his films. Because even though, like you said, there weren't any large, lavish rooms, there were a lot of sets. And it didn't feel quite as claustrophobic as some of his other films, succeeding films feel.
I mean, I like, some of the better scenes, especially like when it comes to dialogue and expository scenes. Some of the better scenes are, the scenes where they're in these small, like a tea house or a bar, or, these small intimate settings, and they're explaining stuff that's going on, and like you get a good feel for the characters. Like
right.
We saw in, oh my God, I'm totally blanking on the name of the movie, but The one with the fruit vendors. With
Invincible Shelling?
Yes. Yeah, the
Yeah.
one with the like the guy kept trying to poison everybody.
You're right, yeah. That was... Oh, wait, was that Masked Avengers? No.
No, it wasn't Mass Avengers. I think it was might not have been Invincible
Yeah.
Shell. It might have been the next one.
Golden Arms?
I think so. Yeah, because they kept trying to poison everybody. I think it was Golden Arms.
That's
Like,
right, yeah.
They were in the bar or restaurant or whatever, and they all leave because the wall sconce with the candle on it falls off and poison leaks out.
Yeah.
Like, that was a great scene, and all the stuff leading up to that point in that set was great because they're going back and forth, and you can tell these guys don't really trust each other, and then he just comes out and he's like, "Oh yeah, everybody get out right now because that thing is going to fall off and it's a pipe full of poison."
Yeah, that was really good. There was one funny scene in this where Shushi, he catches Mo Jun Feng, throws the daggers at him, and he had just made the Iron Fist, so he catches the daggers and crushes them.
Yeah.
And then Mo says to him, "I'd like to be your friend," and he goes, "Why?" "Because being your foe isn't too good."
I will say though that dynamic at the end, it's like, oh, you can't kill me because I've only told you four functions of the 5 that the hand has. It's like, oh, I don't need it. And that's the thing that, again, it's a little bit of a spoiler because it's, how this guy dies, but it's like, he's like, oh, he goes to shoot the third knife because he's got 4 knives loaded up. He's like, I still have 2 left. And he goes to shoot it, and it shoots backwards into him. He's like, yeah, well, that was the 5th thing. You're supposed to reset the spring, otherwise it'll shoot back at you.
Right.
And he immediately shoots the next one. Like, right. And it just shoots right into him. It's like, oh, what do you think, he's lying? Like,
yeah, that was odd.
It's like you went to him because he's a master arms dealer, not arms dealer, but like a master weapons maker.
And right, yeah.
He told you that the last 2, if you don't reset it, will shoot into you. It just shot 1 into you. You have 1 left. What do you think is going to happen? Well, I'll show you. Oh, man. If only somebody had warned. Oh, right. He just told me. Yeah.
Oh, man. The fight scenes were good. You know what was interesting, though? Not interesting, but, well, I guess it was interesting. There were a lot of chicks in this movie, and they didn't really get into the fighting. I mean, yeah, Smiley, I think it was Smiley was the, stabbing people left and right with her thing. But there was one scene where she fought a guy, and it just ended quickly, and she was just like Philip Kwok style, where she just didn't break a sweat. She was like bing, bang, boom, and the guy was down. And that was it, really, for the women fighting in this movie, which I was a little disappointed. I was like, okay, good. There's female characters here. Let's see what they can do, And it didn't really, they didn't really do much.
Especially where they show her at the beginning, like, being so, like, deadly and skilled. And
yeah.
The whole time you just see her, like, this is really the first movie where somebody is actively trying to seduce someone, and like you see that happen. It's like, oh, I'm in room 12. Come on up. Like, yeah. I'll show you.
Yeah, that was funny. And then what was it? Chang Sheng, he gets seduced too, and then before anything even happens, she stabbed him.
Yeah.
Was Peng Shuang stabbed him. I love that name. But she had a cool weapon too, because she's got the chain with the dagger at the end, and I wanted to see more of that weapon.
Yeah, like, why that, was only featured, like, really quickly at the end to take her hostage.
Right. And then, what was it, the police captain there cuts the chain with his 2 fingers. How did he do that?
It was a weak chain.
He just goes, boop, with 2 fingers, and then it's cut, and he saves the daughter. Oh, man. Shushin, whatever his name is, Philip Kwok's character, he had those giant nunchucks that he pulled from out of nowhere. Those were cool.
Yeah, it's like, where did you get those? But
Right.
it's still fun.
Where were you hiding them nunchucks?
Don't worry about it. There's plenty more where that came from.
Right. I got a whole arsenal. They did a lot of cool wire work with characters jumping around, but I really love, as much as the wire work is entertaining, I just love when they're doing regular acrobatics, because I think there was one where Philip Kwok did like a 2 or 3 flip in one
Back
move,
flips.
and then, yeah, that
Mhm.
was insane.
I was just going to say that, like fighting the whip guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so cool. It just shows you the skill of these guys. And the one cool weapon was the what's his name? Yun Zhang had the magnetic daggers. I thought that was a cool plot trick there.
Yeah, especially in their duel there.
Yeah. So I think let's see if there's anything else I wanted to mention here. Oh yes, the character Wu Hao. I think he was one of the 4 thieves. He's a martial arts practitioner known for storing massive amounts of chi in his body, or ki, whatever you want to call it, and he can deflect throwing knives that hit his chest without even leaving a scratch. It kind of reminded me of Golden Arms, and they flash to that scene from the very, very beginning where they had that crazy little intro, and the sword hits him, and it just bends over him like we saw in the last movie, where it was like the sword was practically made of tinfoil.
Yeah, like he was annoying to me. Like, I thought he was just a really annoying character. Like,
Yeah.
I did not like him. Like, it
I
was
don't need
kind of
weapons, I have
cool,
my
and he
fists.
had skill, obviously, but like, oh my god, he was annoying. Do you have
Yeah.
a rake?
Right.
He killed all the dudes with a rake.
But he's no match for Yan Zifei's gauntlet, which fires the spring-loaded knives there.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I can throw this really hard. You know, it's like, I can throw this knife at 80 miles an hour. It's like, but that didn't
Right.
matter. It's like, oh, but this is spring-loaded, and it shoots it at 80 miles an hour. Oh no, I'm dead.
Right.
It's like, how much more, like, power do you think it's coming from, like, a guy who just, this is what he does, and that's all he does is throw knives. Like,
Right.
oh, but it's spring-loaded. It's like, does that really make that much of a difference?
Right. He can only defend against slow weapons, not fast weapons, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like, I have, impenetrable skin. Nothing can hurt me. But it's like, that little knife killed you, as opposed to a sword? Yeah, but it's shot out of a spring, so. Oh, well, there's no defense against that, I guess.
All right, Patsy. So, what are your final thoughts on the life gamble?
Like I said, this has been my least favorite of the Shaw Brothers films that we have covered, for the reasons that I said. However, I did find it enjoyable because of some of the great fight scenes, and we've kind of mocked it a little bit because there's some silliness, but that happens in every Shaw Brothers movie that I've seen so far. A guy,
Right.
We touched on this, a couple of times, where somebody's like stabbed 30 times but manages to run 12 miles and exposit everything that's going on and then dies.
Right.
Well, he can't die. He has important plot information. And then he gives it, and it's like, well, you're no use. Bam, gone. Like,
Well, that's how I knew Philip Kwok was going to get it, because he didn't have any plot information.
yeah, he was done. Like, he had given the jade up, so it's like, well, it's only a matter of time. But at least they gave him a good death. But I will say
Yeah,
that I
that's true.
enjoyed I enjoyed the fight scenes. I enjoyed the choreography. Normally in a film like this, you're like, oh, who's going to betray who and what side are they on? Generally when it's one of those, it's like the trope of, guy taking somebody under his wing. It's like, oh, here's lesson number 3, never trust anyone, which we'll get into. Never trust anybody, which was actually lesson 2.
Right, that's right.
And it's just like, then later on in the movie, they'll betray the main character. Like, I did tell you not to trust anyone.
Right, yeah.
But it got too over the top, where it's like, I'm betraying you. Well, why? Plot convenience. I don't know. Like, it didn't make sense after a while. Like, it's like, I'm going to betray you. And then, because, I don't know, everybody else was doing it, I just wanted to be cool. Like, that's kind of what it felt
if
like.
Everybody else was stealing a jade, would you do it?
Yeah, right? Oh, Johnny betrayed his friend and stole the jade. Would you do it? Oh. Just wanted to be popular. Like I said, the scene at the end when it's like, oh, you brought me the jade, the very thing I asked you to do. Yep, here you go. Oh, thanks. All right, betray him. What?
Right.
Quick, get the flags. It's the only thing that can defeat him. Flags, my only weakness.
Where's the guy with the impervious skin? He could fight the flags.
Yeah, right? Oh, sorry. That knife was thrown slightly faster than the last knife that hit me in the chest, so now I'm dead.
Oh, man. Yeah, I agree with your assessment. I felt like, and I think I said this before, the first hour was mainly set up with some action thrown in, and then the last 40 was really exciting. Like I said, it definitely wasn't a bad movie by any stretch. I just wasn't blown away by it. I think part of my issue with this film is as an audience member, I didn't have a stake in it. There was nothing truly personal in this film. Like, usually, like in a revenge tale, the guy's family's been killed or whatever, and he wants to seek revenge. And that's kind of cool because you can almost relate to that. But this was like, they stole this item, and it was all about the stolen item, and other people's are trying to steal the item. And it was like, I don't care. I don't steal things, so I don't know. So that for me made it just a little less enjoyable. I didn't feel like I was interested enough in what was going on because I really didn't care about the jade.
Yeah, and it's just like, to me, I couldn't tell what the design was. It just kind of looked like a coiled dog turd. And I'm like...
a glow-in-the-dark dog turd.
It's like, wait a minute, like what's the big... And they even said it at the end, it's like, oh, it's worth $100,000, but it's insured for even more. It's like...
Right.
Who cares then? Like, it's not even, like, super, super valuable.
Right. And at that point, was that the big plot twist? Was that supposed to be the big plot twist? Was, oh, it's actually insured for more, so if we make it look like it was stolen, then we can and keep it gone, then we can cash in on the insurance money.
Right, you cash in the insurance money, and then you sell it. So now, instead of 500,000 tail, you get 600,000.
Right. But all in all, it's definitely worth watching, if anything, for the 5 Venoms, because they're just always fun to watch, and they're all such good actors. Even if the voice acting, the English voices aren't that great, you can just tell that they're good actors.
Yeah, the voice acting wasn't the best. But...
Right. I have a feeling, too, actually, now that you mention it, some of, like, the guy who did Chiang Chang's voice in succeeding films that we've seen already, I think he did another character's voice in this one and not Deadly Whip. So that confused me a little bit, too, because I'm starting to recognize the voices, but then it's a different character. I'm like, wait a minute, that's not his voice, you know?
Yeah, it's weird.
I need to do a little bit more diving into who did the voice acting. I know that there's a big interview with one guy that was a main dubbing actor for some of these films, and I'd like to do it a deeper dive, and maybe we can talk about that at some point. But so let's take a break here. That was Life Gamble from 1979, and we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss Day of Anger from 1967.
Hey, cats and kittens, do you remember the 50s? Jukeboxes, hot rods, malt shops, and sock hops.
No, not really.
Oh, well, do you remember that TV show Happy Days? You know, Fonzie and Richie and all like that? A, Sit on It, etc.?
Kind of.
Then join us for These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast where we watch every episode and give you the lowdown on what it all means. Find us at thesedaysareours.libsyn.com and follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. Be there or be square.
You're sure you don't remember Sock Hops?
Sorry, no.
Okay, then.
Hello, this is Rod Barnett. I'm the host of The Bloody Pit, the podcast that examines films from across the decades. On The Bloody Pit, we have several ongoing series of shows within the show focused on specific things in genre cinema that I and my co-hosts find fascinating. There's a long-running series focused on Italian maestro Antonio Margheriti's films from the 1960s all the way up through 1990. There's an on-again, off-again series focused on 1970s science fiction films. There's an in-depth look at the Western movies that William Castle made before he struck out on his own and became the horror auteur that we know and love. A look at the classic Coffin Joe films from Brazil. And our long-term project to look at every Universal horror film made in the 1940s. That's a long project, people. It's going to take us a long time. Sprinkled in amongst those are various other episodes focused on other stranger areas of cinema, like Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, and even some obscure British crime films from time to time. So join me and my rotating crew of co-hosts as we examine the stranger side of cinema through an exploitation lens. Except when we don't. Yeah, you never really know exactly what to expect on The Bloody Pit. So join me for The Bloody Pit.
Greetings, this is Mr. Lobo. Are you a sinsomniac? Do you stay up late and watch what normal people call bad movies till dawn? Black and white low-budget potboilers, box office bombs, West German talking car movies, rock bands versus monster movies, broken down school films, midget zombie and midget spy flicks, guys in gorilla suit movies, even old TV commercials, inappropriate cartoons, drive-in snack bar ads, and worse? Well, we like to say they're not bad movies, just misunderstood. Stay up late with Miss Mittens, your host, Mr. Lobo, and a revolving door of special guests, fellow horror movie hosts, robot monsters, and lovely Real 7 girls for a late-night TV slumber party that we call Cinema Insomnia. You can watch us on channel OSI 74 for Roku. We even have some episodes on Amazon and Alpha Video DVD. You may never get a good night's sleep again.
Lee Van Cleef has been ugly, dirty, and downright mean. Now, watch him get violent.
Let's say I'm buying your revenge for $50,000. Then the honest people of Clifton can owe their debt to Frank Talbot.
Quick with a pistol. And I don't want to question that, Talby. But who knows if you'd take on a real duel?
The weapon that's going to kill me ain't invented yet.
Who gets dragged, shot, kicked, is bound to turn violent. Lee Van Cleef just does it better than most.
find you any way you want.
Okay, next up is the spaghetti western Day of Anger from 1967, originally titled I giorni dell'ira, starring Lee Van Cleef and Giuliano Gemma. Patsy, why don't you give us the synopsis?
Well, the IMDb synopsis says, a scruffy garbage boy becomes the pupil of a famed gunfighter, and the stage for confrontation is set when the gunman becomes unhinged and overruns the boy's town through violence and corruption. Yeah, that's not bad, but I think we can do a little better. Scott is a young man working as a street sweeper in the town of Clifton, Arizona. Now, he's not just working as a street sweeper. We are introduced to him as he is collecting the leavings of the inhabitants of each of the buildings one by one. He has his big buckets, and the first thing I thought was like, man, poor Ringo has a shit job. Because that's literally what he's doing. Like, you know, you see this, you know, old-timey, looks like a, you know what you would expect an old-timey bartender to look like, you know, with the mustache and the arm garters and the suspenders, and he comes out and he leaves a bucket on the stairs. And, you know, here comes Scott, and he takes the bucket and pours it into, oh, yeah, it's very clear what it was. Scott is looked down upon by the town people as he has never known his father and only knows his mother's first name was Mary. The only two people who show him respect and friendship are Murph Allen Short, the former gunslinger, and Blind Bill, a partially blind old beggar. Well, not entirely true. That one little blonde prostitute seems to have taken a shine to him.
That's true.
When Frank Talby rides into town and kills Perkins, one of Scott's bullies, Scott realizes the opportunity to change his life. Now, when we first introduce them, you know, Scott is very helpful when Talby comes into town, and he's like, "Oh, you know, what are you looking for? What can I, you know, how can I help you?" You know, even though everybody treats him like garbage, you know, he's willing to help this stranger. He's like, "Oh, I'm looking for a stable. I'm looking for a place to, you know, spend the night." And he's like, "Oh yeah, if you go right down there, and if you go over here, you know, this is where you want to go." And he's like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "You want to earn $1?" He's like, "Oh yeah, $1. Whew!" I mean, you know, 1860s $1's pretty good. So he he's like, "Yep, take my horse to the stable and meet me back at the saloon." But nobody wants him in the saloon, which is where he has this confrontation with one of the bullies, Perkins, whose wife had just delivered twins the night before, along with a mayor who had a severe case of diarrhea. I don't know why that was vital to the plot, but apparently it was. So Scott realizes that he has an opportunity to change his life and decides to prove his worth as a gunfighter. After the trial, because nobody wanted him in the... because this synopsis isn't 100%. But after the trial, the reason he left town is because the judge and the owner of the saloon and the marshal were all part of Scott just getting the shit kicked out of him. Like, they just punched the hell out of him in the middle of the courthouse, and the judge was like, "Hey, do that outside where I can't see it, so I can't prosecute." Right. So Scott's like, "Screw this, I'm out of here." Talby leaves town to go after Wild Jack, his former associate, who owes him $50,000. Again, $50,000 back then. I mean, that's a lot of money now.
Right.
Scott follows him, and Talby reluctantly lets him tag along and agrees to teach him 10 essential rules about gunfighting. I don't know if we got to 10, but
we did, yeah.
Talby and Scott find Wild Jack, but the criminal tells the pair he doesn't have the money anymore, as he was double-crossed by a group of Clifton's most seemingly respectable citizens. The same citizens who despised and mistreated Scott. And as soon as you start hearing, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, oh, is that guy and that guy and that guy? Oh, the guys that just punched the crap out of Scott in the middle of the courthouse? Yeah, that makes sense. Gunfight ensues, and Scott manages to convince Talby of his skills with a revolver. After taking care of Wild Jack's gang, the pair return to Clifton, where Scott changes his name to Scott Mary after Talby's suggestion, which is what he told him when they first met. He goes, "What's your name?" He's like, "Scott." "Scott what?" He goes, "Well, I don't have a last name. I never knew my dad." He's like, "I only knew my mother's name was Mary." He's like, "Why don't you just call yourself Scott Mary?" He's like, "Well, people will make fun of me." He's like, "Yeah, so." Like, Lee Van Cleef is such a badass. Like, with Scott's help, Talby takes over the town, killing first Perkins' gang and later the Inner Circle, who runs Clifton, and conspired to kill Talby when he revealed their dirty secret. Talby becomes the de facto town manager, and Scott his second in command. Nevertheless, Scott's old friend Murph, who taught Scott how to shoot, well, he didn't really teach him how to shoot, he taught him how to draw, explains to Scott that his fast draw and accuracy has now become a threat to Talby, who is aging and wants to settle in Clifton. Soon after, Murph takes the sheriff's badge and forbids the carrying of guns. See, they didn't call him the sheriff, they called him the marshal, which I thought was odd. Right. But I'm thinking it's a translation thing.
Oh, okay.
Scott warns Talby not to mess with his former mentor, but Talby obliquely says that he won't back down. Murph knows that he can't defeat Talby in a duel, but he still decides to face him, and he also knows that in doing so, Scott will finally realize that Talby and his ruthless ways are not Scott's true path. When Murph comes to take Talby's gun with Scott watching, Talby shoots and kills him in cold blood. Accordingly, Scott flees in anger and decides to settle things in a shootout. Scott finds that Murph left him famous gunfighter Doc Holliday's gun, adjusted for quick fire, as well as some instructions on how to defeat Talby. Scott defeats Talby's gang by taking advantage of the rules Talby once taught him, and then kills Talby in an open duel. Triumphant but despondent, Scott discards his gun and walks away from the scene of the duel with Blind Bill. I wouldn't say he discards his gun so much as he just hucks it through, like, the nearest window in right. You know, saddened rage.
There's probably some little old lady sitting there eating her soup, and the gun comes flying in through the window.
Well, and we get to see at the beginning, you know, all the people with their, like, nightcaps and shit, like, leaning out the windows, like, "Oh, what's going on? Who's shooting? We don't hear any gunshots here in Clifton." And the guy's like, "Oh, I was just shooting my gun to clean it." It's like, yeah, okay. That sounds accurate. What's the best way to clean this gun? I don't know, shoot some bullets through it? Wow, you're a genius. Yeah, but first put soap on the bullets.
That was
water
gonna
down
say
the barrel.
that.
There you go, that's the best way.
That's so funny. So, yeah, first impression, Patsy, going into this.
Going into it, I was like, oh, you know, this is going to be interesting because, you know, the first one we saw, Death Rides a Horse, had Lee Van Cleef in it, and I'd never really seen Lee Van Cleef in, you know, this type of role. And obviously I'd seen him in Escape from New York, which I had only just recently watched, but you don't get the full breadth of how badass Lee Van Cleef is. In that movie, you have to see him in a Western because he's just so awesome. Like, he was born to play a Western badass. Like, he really was.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, Gemma's a guy that we've seen in, you know, 2 films already playing the same character. So this was the first time I've seen him playing somebody that wasn't Ringo. And, you know, so I'd been familiar with who he was and how, you know, how cool he could be. So I was looking forward to this when I saw it. Like, I didn't watch any trailers. Like, that's generally when with these films I won't watch the trailer and I won't look up any information. I'll just turn it on. And this was actually streaming on Tubi.
Okay. Oh, good.
The free service, which is good because I much prefer watching them if I have the opportunity to watch them sitting in my recliner as opposed to sitting in front of my computer. There's the app that I can watch.
What I do is I have a hard drive, so if I have a digital version of a movie, I just put it on the hard drive and watch it on my living room TV.
Yeah, see, that's a much better plan, but my TV isn't a smart TV, so I can't project it on there. Although I don't know if I could do it on my Fire Stick. I might be able to. I don't know. That's an experiment for another day. But
right.
I was looking forward to this one because I was, like we talked about in the last episode, which was a couple of weeks ago at this point, not, a huge fan of Return of Ringo because if it had been called something else, because all the same actors returned from the first film, but they were all playing different characters, and it almost seemed that, like the only consistent thing was Giuliano Gemma as Ringo, but even he was a totally different character, so it's like they should have just called it something else.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you're capitalizing on the name, but like it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So I was looking for him to, I guess redeem himself is a poor term because it's not really his fault of what happened. But what I was looking forward to was, okay, I'm going to see this, and I'm going to see a new, a different version where he's not playing the same character that I'm familiar with. So I can, it's like a clean slate.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I walked into this, looking forward to, since we saw Death Rides a Horse with Lee Van Cleef and how cool he was there. And then, like you said, at least the first Ringo, Giuliano Gemma was so cool. So looking forward to the team up for me was exciting because I loved both actors now. And of course I grew up with Lee Van Cleef, but I really didn't know Giuliano Gemma till we watched Pistol for Ringo. And I was just kind of looking forward to seeing sort of these two titans of spaghetti westerns, star together in a movie. I watched it Wednesday, I think, the first time, and I have to say, I walked in and I guess I had a certain expectation for the movie, and at the end, I wasn't really happy with it, even though this thing is beautifully shot. Every scene, every frame is like well composed. The camera work was amazing. The characters were all good. There was one thing that was nagging at me that I didn't really like, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But then I watched it again this morning, and after having done some research, and then I watched it again with fresh eyes, I liked it a lot better than the first time I saw it, which, like I said, was 2 days ago. So I actually really enjoyed this. I really got a lot more out of it the second time around. I think it was because the first time I had certain expectations of what the characters were going to do, and they didn't do what I thought they were going to do. So I had to kind of get over that, get over myself, and just, let it go and watch the movie again, and that really worked.
Yeah, I found that, going in with little to no expectation, only knowing that I liked the two lead actors, really helped, because I did enjoy this quite a bit. And I as I'm watching this, I'm like, I'm taking notes, and there's some interesting characteristics about Scott that really take on a whole new dimension as the movie progresses.
Yes.
One thing I didn't understand is when the guy yells at him and calls him ugly. And it's like, he's a leading man in a Western.
Right.
Ugly's generally not the term. But again, it might have been a different, maybe something that got lost in translation. Maybe instead of ugly, they called him like disgusting or something like that, and it just translated. But it's like, like he's kind of a handsome dude. Said. Like, come on, like, come on, like he's like this poor dude, and like you have this smoking hot prostitute like giving him the come hither look It's like, he doesn't have any money. Like, but you're still like, how you doing there, buddy?
Yeah.
You come back
I
after
just couldn't
sweeping
wait
up
for him
in
to
front of the saloon and
Right. I just couldn't wait for him to get rid of that coat. It was just so nasty from slumming that, chumming that shit all over the place. Or lugging it, I guess is the word I was looking for. But.
yeah, because he has like a cart with 2 huge barrels, and he just walks up and down the, call it a town. It's really a street with, a dozen buildings, and they just go back and forth, and he just collects all the shit water and pours it in his bucket. So gross. And then he just like dumps it in a hole in the stables. It's like,
right.
Where does that hole go? Nowhere.
No kidding.
What do you do when it fills up? I don't know, dig another hole? Well, that's what they used to do with outhouses. Like, you have your outhouse, and I learned this from reading Joe R. Lansdale's book, The Bottoms. You have your outhouse, and you dig your hole, and you move your outhouse over the hole. And then when the hole gets filled, you pack dirt on top of it and just move the outhouse somewhere else.
Oh, gross.
Probably a good idea to remember where you're moving it from, though. Probably want to mark it somehow. So you go to dig, it's like, man, we already used this place. I did like when he got back to his, he went back to the stable to dump everything out, and he, like, climbs up to get his quote-unquote gun and gun belt. It's like a piece of twine. And I'm like, I wrote down, that's a nice belt. It matches your fancy gun. Like, is that made of wood or chocolate? Like,
right.
He's like, watch me draw my gun. It's like, what are you doing? He's like, it's like, I need to practice for 12 seconds a day. No wonder you're so
get a little
good
bit
at this. You did it like 6 times.
We did get a little bit of that Giuliano Gemma athleticism, the way he pulls himself up onto the loft there.
Oh, and then the flip down.
Yeah. I thought that was cool.
I bet that was totally improv. They were like, all right.
Yeah.
We don't have much of a, medical budget on this, so don't go doing anything stupid. All right. Watch me do the backflip off a hayloft.
Well, even like it was like a front flip to get up there. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, like he did that cool leap up motion, and then like the flip down, which I liked. So,
if it was me, I would have landed on my head. I would have tried to do the flip up and then just went straight down. Gravity would have just grabbed me in.
I would have had a ladder. I'd have been like, screw this jumping and flipping shit. I'm too old for this.
That's funny.
But I did get a little confused when he starts talking to Murph about, he's like, with this $1 he's going to give me, I'll have $8 and 10 more and I can go buy a Colt. And I'm thinking, horse. So he can leave the town.
No, I was thinking gun.
He meant pistol.
Yeah.
Colt 45.
Right, that's what I got out of that.
See, I thought as he spoke, and they mentioned the Doc Holliday's gun. I was like, okay, he meant a gun, and yeah, that makes sense because he was just playing with the chocolate gun that he got for Easter. I'm like, that
hurry
makes
up and
sense.
shoot it before it melts.
Yeah, right. Draw. Oh, my gun melted. I got chocolate all over my fancy gun belt.
It's like, I'm surprised it didn't come in like a plastic case, with a cardboard back on it. And just tears it open.
Yeah, it had wrapped in foil.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just
man.
like.
So this movie. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it definitely makes him into like this poor, downtrodden, sad sack. I'm like, but he seemed happy at the beginning. He's got like this smile on his face. It's like, dude, you're lugging barrels of shit. Like, how are you? And like liquid shit, because it was just like
right,
dark brown, almost black, just like brackish water. It's like, oh. And like the smell apparently
so
didn't get to
disgusting.
him. Like,
Right.
like, it's a nice sunny day. I'm out for a walk.
You know, that whole scene reminded me of you remember the cartoon, the newspaper cartoon, The Far Side?
Yes.
Okay, there was one panel where there's this dude, and it's obviously hell, and there's two demons standing there, and there's this dude's got this wheelbarrow full of rocks, and he's walking around with it whistling, and he looks all happy, and one demon leans to the other, he goes, I don't think this guy's getting the whole thing here.
Yeah, it was something like, I don't think we're getting to this guy. Or something. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, there's flames everywhere. He's just, like, having a good time, whistling, bringing his wheelbarrow around.
Right.
It's like,
So this movie was directed by Tonino Valeri, and it was his second film following Taste for Killing. He went on to film his third spaghetti western film, The Price of Power, which also featured Gemma in '69. And this guy's had an interesting career. He started as an assistant director on Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars before moving on to directing himself. He also did an Italian horror film called The Long Hair of Death in '64 and the Italian crime thriller Go, Gorilla, Go in '75. And he's considered, even though he only made 5 spaghetti westerns, he's considered one of the genre's master filmmakers, because 3 of his 5 are considered classics, which would be this film, The Price of Power, and a movie called My Name is Nobody, which I won't get into details here, but I think we're going to cover that relatively soon on the show for reasons, like I said, I'll get into it on that episode. But yeah, so he's did a great job. I loved how this movie looked. I loved the camera, the scene compositions. You know, there's one scene towards the end when the two main characters are going to face off, and Lee Van Cleef comes out of the building, and the camera just follows him out, follows him down the stairs into the courtyard, and it was just so nice and smooth. It was really awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely some good shots, really good cinematography. I did like the town setting, and we did get, you know, the one thing I look for in every Western film, you know, a guy getting shot, falling out of a window, crashing through a roof or a balcony. I like that one, the sniper shot.
Yeah.
When Lee Van Cleef does like the roll and like pops up and shoots the guy, and he like falls through. I was like, cool. Wow, that dude looked like he got wrecked. Like the stuntman looks like he because that like that whole thing just like fell apart and crashed and like everything collapsed on him. It's like, oh, I don't know if that was supposed to happen. That is some shoddy workmanship right there.
It just, Lee Van Cleef's role was really awesome. I just thought that was, because that was him doing it too, not a stuntman, you know.
Oh yeah, his like some of the shot, like the scene at the end where the guy gets the drop on. I almost called him Ringo again. The guy gets a drop on Scott, and he's like, "Drop your gun," and he like tosses it in the air and like twirls it around and like drops, catches it, turns, and shoots the guy.
Yes.
And it's like,
yes,
okay.
That was so cool.
And again, you know, one of my biggest pet peeves in action films is when they cut 30 times to show the, like, if this was made today, they would, you know, he'd throw the gun in the air and you'd see it twirl in slow motion. And then the next thing you'd see is like his hand catching it and he'd be on the ground firing. But like, they had that wide shot where it was 100% clear that it was him tossing the gun, catching it as he rolled, and popped up and just shot the dude. It's like, that was an impressive scene. Like,
yeah,
I'm totally okay if that was like the 35th take.
Right.
But like, that was great, and it was done so much better than you would see it done in anything. Because I've seen scenes like that. The one that comes to mind is in the I think it was Resident Evil Apocalypse, the second one. Okay. Where they're like, drop your gun, and she's like, okay, and she like lets the gun fall out of her hand, and then she waits a full second, and then drops to the ground, catches it, and shoots the two guys. It's like, first of all, that gun would have already hit the ground.
Right.
And, like, the amount of time you're waiting, like, you almost have to drop at the same time as the gun.
Right, yeah.
But you, like, lets it drop. I mean, you know, people have seen, you know, you've seen things like that. And I've seen other things where, like, the guy just kind of, like, lets the gun dangle from his finger and, like, pulls the trigger with his pinky or something and, like, shoots the guy. It's like, all right, you know, that's kind of cool. Like, saw it coming. But this, like, he takes the gun. Like, I cannot stress this enough. And tosses it in the air. Almost like, oh, you got me. Like, he tosses it in frustration. And the thing's twirling, you know, end over end. And he drops, catches it as it's falling, and, like, rolls all in one motion and just shoots the guy. It was so cool. Like, it was, you know, as the theme of the film goes, like, you know, it's like, oh, everyone, you know, Talby's worried that you're replacing him, you're younger and faster, and you do everything better now. It's like almost like the one-upping of that scene where Talby shot the sniper from earlier in the movie.
And that was cool, too, where the guy, Owen, he's a stranger that comes to town. We don't know at that point what he's doing. And he just goes up to Lee Van Cleef, motions with his eyes. Lee Van Cleef looks over with his eyes, sees the sniper, and then, you know, takes him out. And that was just so awesome. That, like, they didn't have to talk at all to indicate what was going on.
Yeah, and then, you know, you have the guy, he's like, oh, is he on our side? Is he with us or against us? It's like, he's a random gunfighter who showed up, like, with this long case. Clearly he's got a rifle of some sort. You know, a special one that he's really good with, because why else would he have it in a case like that? And, like, some epic facial hair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It made him look like a tiger, I thought.
Yeah, and, like, it's like he just shows up out of nowhere, like, after you've already gunned down an entire gang. It's like, why do you think he's there? I was looking at this, like, again, this is the, fourth Western that I've seen. I'm like, oh yeah, he's here. Yeah. He's here to kill this guy. Like, but he's going to do it, you know, straight up, and, like, they're gonna have a duel of some sort, because, like, that's the code of the West. I'm like, there's no question. Like, Lee Van Cleef should have known better.
Right. So let's get into the cast and the some of the credits here too a little bit first. So you've got the writer was co-written by Valeri, the director, and Ernesto Gestaldi, and it was loosely based on a novel it's a German title called Der Tod ritt Dienstags, which means Death Rode on Tuesdays, by a guy named Ron Barker, and they basically said, yeah, we're gonna base it on this book. And they only used a handful of scenes out of it. And the only reason they did that was so they could appease the West German co-producers and get their money to make the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I have the same thing. It's like they just want... It's like, oh yeah, you know, we'll use a little bit from this, and we'll say that it's based on... I mean, you could say based on, you know, like when they say, like, oh, based on true events, and, like, you know, you set, you know... Like Titanic, based on true events. It's like, yeah, the Titanic was a thing that happened, and, you know, it did sink, but, like...
Right.
I think that's where the similarities end. Like, I've watched movies like that where it's like, oh, these are based on actual events, and it's like... It's like, oh, yeah. Well, it happened on a Tuesday, and Tuesday's a real day, you know?
That's
he was killed by a shark riding a grizzly bear. Like, oh.
Right.
But it happened on a Tuesday, and Tuesday's a real day.
So I wanted to talk briefly about the music, and I'm going to jump out of this film for a quick second just to go back to Life Gamble, because I totally forgot to bring it up. I guess it wasn't in my notes, but did you notice in that movie the music, it was a piece of music, and of course I don't have it in front of me, it was a piece of music from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which was like the main piece they used throughout that film.
See, it sounded familiar to me, but there was almost a like a John Williams Star Wars.
Yes.
I got from
that too. Yeah, that especially at the scene where, of course, we're like way out of the Western movie now, but it reminded me of the music leading up to when Han Solo got frozen in carbonite.
Yes.
It was like dun 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 dun, and I kept waiting for it to go dun 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 dun.
Yeah, like you definitely. Maybe it's just because of that music has been used in 9, 11 different movies and TV shows and video games, that even like a slight variation of it, you're like, oh yeah, this is Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is a space western, like.
That's true, but and that movie was prior to Empire, because Empire came out in '80 and that was '79.
Yeah.
But the song they used from Holy Grail is called "The Promised Land" by a guy named Stanley Black, and that's on Spotify. So let's get back into this movie, Day of Anger. The music was composed by a guy named Riz Ortolani, and he's done a whole bunch of movie scores, mostly for Italian movies. One of the main ones that he did was for Ruggero Deodato's House on the Edge of the Park. And then modern, younger audience out there, people listening to this now may recall that his music has been used on soundtracks for things like Grand Theft Auto London 1969, both Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2, a movie called Drive from 2011, and Django Unchained in 2012. So Tarantino really liked spaghetti westerns, and he lifted a lot from them. So this guy's music was... You may have, recognized some of it when you were thinking about Kill Bill.
Yeah, it definitely, I think with Tarantino, because he's such a devotee of classic films, you're going to get a lot of these homages and tributes to, the classic scores, because, as we've talked about on this show, and I've talked about, 1,000 times on other shows, the music really helps to enhance whatever's going on.
Exactly.
You hear the Halloween theme or the Jaws theme. Like, even if you haven't seen those movies, you hear that theme, the Jaws theme, and you're like, okay, something bad is on its way. Something bad is going to happen. You have, say, like the Exorcist theme, and you listen to that, and it's just like you're being inexorably driven towards a confrontation. Like, that's just how you feel listening to that music. And
right.
It's it's a huge part of any film. And we've said, it can enhance a bad film, and make it watchable.
Right. Yep.
But it can also, like, the music that's out of place, like, if you're being stalked by, like, this supernatural killer and, like, circus music is playing, like, it kind of takes you out of the moment. Unless it's, like, what they do with all these new things, and they just play, like, whatever song, but they play it like, it's a choir of creepy British children, and it's played at, like, 75% speed.
Right.
It's like, okay, if that type of circus music is playing, yes, that's creepy.
I thought the groovy, funky intro was interesting. Interesting way to set up the movie.
Yeah, I think that's what contributed to my, initial impression of Scott. It was just like, you have this intro music, and, like, this guy, it's like, oh, I don't know, what is he doing? Like, and the first guy that sees him, like, how you doing, Scott? And he's like, oh, I'm doing fine. How are you? Like, oh, this is a guy who's well liked, and everyone likes him, and he has a crappy job, but this is he likes it, and then, like, it's not that. And again, this is what we're talking about. Like, it's literal. We were just talking about when it comes to music, setting the mood for something. It's like that is not the case at all. Like, everybody hates this guy for something he can't control. Like, it's not his fault. He's a bastard, son of a prostitute. Like, that's not his fault. Because now all I can think of is the thing from Hamilton, bastard son of a whore. Like, that's all he. But like, that's not his fault. He can't control who his parents are.
Right. But that actually wasn't what I was referring to. I meant prior to that with the credits at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
The groovy intro.
Oh, yeah, the psychedelic thing where they just showed the same, like, 4 scenes over and over again.
Right,
in
yes.
different colors.
It was very, what's his name? Andy Warhol.
The weirdest part, and, like, there were a lot of weird things in this. Like, they show, like, a guy flipping the gun behind his back both ways, and they showed it, like, 300 times. It was Lee Van Cleef's face.
Yeah.
And you have, like, the credit, and you're trying to read what the credit says, and the credit scrolls across one of his eyes. And it's being pursued by a man on horseback, and then it disappears, and then it pops up in the other eye, and then the guy on horseback goes by it, and then, like, they keep showing it, and the guy on horseback keeps shooting the credit, and it keeps disappearing or moving across the screen. It's like,
right.
What the hell is going on here? It's so out of... You know what it is? It's the Willy Wonka boat ride of credits.
Oh, there you go.
It's so out of place, and it's so trippy and psychedelic. You're just like...
Right.
What am I watching? Like, what is this? Like, Professor Groovy's Smile Time LSD hour? Like, what are we watching here?
Oh, man. Yeah, it was like a piece of Terry Gilliam animation. It was like, what is happening?
It's so bizarre and so weird, and it totally sets you up for, like, thinking this movie is going to be something it's not. Like, the first 10 minutes, counting the credits and, like, the opening are just like, it's like, oh, okay, this is what this is. Nope, this is totally different. This is not, this is not what this was set up to be. What is happening?
Right. So I just wanted to briefly touch on the cast here. Of course, as we mentioned, we've got Giuliano Gemma as Scott Mary and Lee Van Cleef as Frank Talby. We had Andrea Bosick as Abel Murray. He was in Danger Diabolic in 1966 with John Philip Law, who we saw in Death Rides a Horse. One of the characters, I think this was the blonde prostitute, Krista Linder. She played Gwen.
Mm-hmm.
I found an interesting credit of hers. She was in a Mexican wrestling movie. She starred with the Blue Demon in a film called Invasion of the Dead in 1973. So I don't think I've seen that one. I love Mexican wrestling movies. I'm going to have to check that one out if I can. Then we've got a bunch of other actors that we haven't really seen before on this show, so we're not going to get into them. However, I didn't actually see it. And even when I watched it today, I kind of forgot to look for it. But apparently Paul Naschy, the famous, the Lon Chaney of Spain, he has an uncredited role here. So, and I couldn't online, I couldn't find out. Every time it mentions it, it just says he's in the movie. It doesn't say what character he played or where in the movie he is. So it's probably like a Where's Waldo thing. You have to find him in the film.
Yeah, it's I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what? I'm actually going to talk to Rod Barnett later on, who does the Naschy cast, and I'll ask him about that if he knows. Because he'll probably knows. I mean, Paul Naschy had a small part in what was the movie with Moses, the Ten Commandments.
Oh, okay.
He has a part in that. Yeah. So. So a lot of interesting things about this movie. I thought Gemma's dub into English was interesting because it had an authentic Southern accent, and I thought the voice really fit him.
Yeah, it, for as much grief as we give the Shaw Brothers films about, dubbing with weird voices, I think this one was done really well, and you could tell that, they were speaking in English for the most part. Like, this wasn't like, Ringo or something, where they were clearly speaking Italian. Like
Right.
most of these actors were speaking English.
Well, I wonder if they do that because Lee Van Cleef speaks English. Obviously that's his native language, and he dubs his own voice. So maybe he's got to be able to hear understand what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, but that leads to, does everybody on set speak English? To know what's going on, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, European schools are much different from American schools, where European schools, because all the countries are so close and people are able to travel fairly quickly. It would be like, oh, I'm taking a trip to New York, for you or I. It's like, oh, I'm driving from Spain to France today, or I'm taking a road trip to Germany. Like, you have to be able to speak different languages, so you have a pretty good basis. So even though there's obviously different dialects, if you speak Spanish or French, you can go, if you're speaking French, you can go to, Switzerland or Belgium or France and be able to get by because, again, like just the same as you have, English from Britain and English from, Scotland and Ireland are not the same as English in, say, the south of America or New England. It's all basically the same language. Tree is tree is tree, but, different idioms and dialects and accents and stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if these guys were, if not fluent, familiar with English, especially enough to, act and get the dialect, because, the facial expressions match what they're saying and how they're saying it, and, the emotional resonance of whatever the scene happens to be. So, I mean, I like the fact that, when they have the American actors and they're dubbing it in English, it's easier, because sometimes, like we've talked about before, a bad dub, like in the Life Gamble film, a bad dub can take you out of the film. I was like,
exactly,
I will go over to my friend's house.
I have a feeling too that Lee Van Cleef, he was in Italy for like 10 or 15 years. He had to have picked up the language, I think.
Oh yeah,
because Italian's pretty easy to learn. So
yeah, he definitely. I'm 100% sure, but he was able to get by without an accent.
Right. Yeah.
But again, he's not supposed to have an accent. Like, they're supposed to be in Arizona.
Right. That's true.
So, I mean, I am not well versed in late 1860s Arizonan history, but I'm not overly sure that they had a large Italian population.
Right.
Mexican, yes, it's right on the border, and a lot of people were traveling back and forth, as we saw in the first Ringo film.
Right. Yep. So I thought it was interesting too that Scott's. What did he have there? Was it a mule or a donkey?
He said mule.
Okay.
Which makes sense, because I mean, it did have horse-like qualities. For folks who aren't aware of the difference, a mule is a half horse, half donkey.
Right.
So it's not quite the pack animal that a mule is, but it's also not quite the speed demon that a horse could be. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's a strong, durable animal that can also carry a larger load.
Right. And I just thought it was interesting that he named it Sartana, which that's a series of spaghetti westerns about a character named Sartana. But the first film, which is called If You Meet Sartana, Pray for Your Death, didn't actually come out till the following year, 1968. So I'm wondering, I haven't had a chance to really look into it, but I'll bet you Sartana is based on a series of books, and that's where he got the name from, because he clearly couldn't have gotten it from the movie, hadn't been produced yet,
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes the most sense.
But now the fact that he had the mule and he was kind of rough with it leads into a interesting element where Talby basically tells him he doesn't like people to mistreat their animals. So, we get an indication here that he's probably an okay guy. This Talby guy. He likes animals.
It kind of reminds me of there is a scene in Lethal Weapon 3 where they're Mel Gibson and Rene Russo's characters are approached by a large Rottweiler, and her response is just shoot it. And he's like, I can't shoot a dog. People, sure, but dogs, no. And I think that's, that's the whole basis for John Wick.
Right.
It's okay to, these guys like, oh, I'll shoot this guy in the face in cold blood, but I'm not going to shoot, a horse or a dog unless I have to, like to put it out of its misery, like Old Yeller or a horse with a broken leg or something.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's almost like a moral code. It's like, this guy will shoot you as soon as look at you, but the animal didn't do anything to you. And I think that might have something to do with the rampant Christianity that even these gunfighters were ardent religious guys.
Yeah. I don't think you have to be overly religious to know that, you just have to not be evil. An evil person kills a dog, but, good guys, even if they, like you said, even if they kill other people for whatever reason, they're not going to kill an animal unless they're truly evil.
What I'm saying is even like the bad guy, the villain that, it's like, he'll tie the girl to the train tracks, but, he won't kick a dog.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that's his line. It's like, haha, I'll get you, because it's like, oh, well, I didn't do anything. Yeah, but everyone's born with original sin. Twirl his mustache and run off.
Oh, that's too funny. I liked the whole teacher-student theme here in the movie. We kind of saw something similar to that in Death Rides a Horse. And I think there's quite a few spaghetti westerns that sort of have the similar theme where you've got the aging gunfighter who takes in the young guy and, wants to train him. And see, this here was part of the issue that I had with the movie the first time I watched it, which, like I said, I've changed my opinion on the film, but I walked into it thinking it was going to be Lee Van Cleef and Giuliano Gemma teaming up to fight bad guys. And
that's what I did too.
What we got was, though, he took he took Scott in, we'll say, and basically he was like a little kid. Like when he buys him the gun, Scott's face was just like a little kid going, "Oh my God, I can have this! I could get a belt too!"
Mm-hmm. He was using him for his skills. Like he's like, "Oh, well, these guys were mean to you, so let's get revenge on them." Also, I'm going to get $50,000. Like, you notice Scott wasn't involved in any of the monetary transactions aside from, ooh, look at your fancy new duds and your new gun, and well, I'll buy you this gun. We'll get into the gun a little bit later, but everything he did served his purpose, and by him I mean Talby. Everything that he did for Scott, while keeping Scott happy and making him think like, oh, what a swell guy. He's such a stand-up dude. Like everything he did was for his own benefit. Like he was manipulating him from the start, and that's it's definitely he's cocky enough to be like, oh, well, I'm going to teach you all these things, but I'm not going to teach you the most important things. We get that from Murph later on in the film, and even at the beginning, it's like, doesn't matter how fast you are, you need to know tricks, because even like a fraction of a second is going to mean the difference between life and death.
Yes, exactly.
And, I think that's where the 9th and 10th lessons came in. Although, for a guy who, we see him at the end of the film, like reciting everything that he has been taught.
Yeah.
It took him a little while to grasp number 3, which is never get between a gun and its target, because we saw that in the first encounter with Wild Jack.
Yep.
It's like, ooh.
Where he was in the little bar there. Hey, folks. I just wanted to take a minute here to tell you about the hosting service that we use at Haven Podcasts. Podserve.fm. Podcast hosting has never been easier. They do all the work to get your podcast on Apple Podcasts and other major podcast networks. They help you navigate the podcasting world, whether you're brand new or have years of experience. Folks, I can't tell you how happy I am with their service. When I first started this podcast, I searched around intensely for the right hosting platform. I found Podserve and used their simple 4-step process, and in a short amount of time, my podcasts were on the internet and available through all the major podcast networks. And their customer support is unreal. Every time I goof things up and make a mistake, like posting the wrong show to the wrong feed, I email them, and I kid you not, within minutes I get a response and the problem is resolved. And they're the only podcasting host that actually helps you get listeners. Other podcast hosts stop at podcast upload and don't help promote your podcast. Well, Podserve makes sure your podcast is seen by thousands of people. The promotion is free, and they put you on podparadise.com, which has over 5,000 visits a day from avid podcast listeners and is growing every day. Each day, Pod Paradise selects 5 podcasts to spotlight on their front page. Maybe yours could be there soon. Podserve's pricing is simple. Only $19 a month. That's it. No tiered pricing platform, just one low fee. For $19 a month, you get unlimited storage, unlimited podcasts, free podcast promotion, your podcasts on all platforms, detailed download analytics, one-on-one customer support. You pay month to month, and you can cancel at any time. And when you sign up, you get 14 days free. You don't even have to give them your credit card. I love their service so much I put a reminder in my phone to add my credit card when the 14 days was almost up. I couldn't give them my $19 fast enough. I'm telling you, I really didn't believe it until I actually signed up and saw my podcasts on everything from iTunes to Stitcher and Spotify and more in a ridiculously short amount of time. So if you've got a podcast and you don't have a hosting platform, I highly recommend podserve.fm. Check them out. So yeah, let's go over Towie's lessons here. You've got number 1, you should never beg another man.
Yep.
Number 2, you mustn't trust anyone.
Yep.
And as you said, number 3, never get between a gun and its target. Number 4 was interesting. Punches are like bullets. If you don't make the first one count, you just might be finished, which is all too true.
Yep.
Number 5 was, this one I really stuck out to me, and I'll tell you why. You wound a man, you better kill him, or sooner or later he's going to kill you. And that reminded me of the book The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
Yep.
And in that book, I remember, because I read it a long time ago, but one of the things he says was, never leave an enemy alive, for only the living can seek revenge.
Right. And that's definitely a theme we see in how many Westerns, like hang 'em high.
Right.
Like, I haven't seen it, but I know the thing is like, somehow Eastwood gets out of being hanged and comes back and seeks revenge on everybody that wronged him. Like, how many movies have we seen where it's like, oh, you should have killed me when you had the chance, and like that's how the person dies, is like the guy comes back for revenge, or the lady comes back for revenge because of, it's like, oh, you should have killed me when you had the opportunity, but you didn't, so now I'm going to kill you. Like, and the wise old mentor thing that you're talking about, like, yeah, that's like how many samurai films were like this, which is where, Westerns were based. It's like, oh, I'm this aging samurai, and there's this hotshot guy that's coming for me, so I'm going to teach, this young kid, just about everything I know, and that one secret technique that no one else knows. We saw that in Kill Bill, the 5-point palm exploding heart technique. We saw
right.
We saw It's like, oh, well, I have a feeling I'll train this person, but I have a feeling they'll come back and kill me in the end because, I'm the only one that represents a challenge to them. So I'm going to teach them 99%, but I'm going to also have this secret apprentice on the side that I'm going to teach them everything. And that's what we saw with Talby, where he's like, oh yeah, here's all these things. I'm teaching you all these things. And then at the end, Murph's like, yeah, but what about this and this and this? Did he tell you about that? Oh, no. Yeah, there's a reason. So he still has the advantage of you. Like, you're faster, you're younger, you're a better shot, you're more accurate, but you'll still lose because you don't know how to cheat.
Right.
We see this in... there's a great example of this, and they don't really highlight it, but if you pay attention, in Game of Thrones, you see there's a fight between Carl Tanner and Jon Snow. And they're both incredibly skilled fighters. And Carl realizes that maybe on skill alone he can't beat Jon. So he spits in his eye. He's like, you were taught to fight with honor. You were taught, in a castle by a master at arms. You're taught to fight honorably. I learned to fight in the slums where you use anything to your advantage. And he probably would have gotten killed except somebody intervened on their behalf. Few episodes later, we see him employ this exact same technique, like he's getting his ass kicked. So he spits in the guy's eye and then caves in his skull with a hammer while he's distracted. So it's like, but they didn't overly oh, you have to do this in order to win. I've seen that there was a comic book crossover where Namor the Submariner fought Aquaman, and they were it was a Marvel DC crossover, and the fight was to immobilize your opponent, and Aquaman uses his power to talk to sea life to have a whale jump out of the water and land on top of Namor, pinning him down. And he goes, that's your weakness. You're too noble to cheat.
Right.
So there's, tons of examples of this.
Yeah.
All over the place. Like even in the movie we just watched with Life Gamble. Right. Where, the guy's got this sword and he's fighting with the sword, but it's like, aha, I blocked your sword. It's like, yeah, but there's another blade at the end. Click, now I've got you.
Yeah.
So it's these little things that are sprinkled in, like these little messages, and it's stuff that's been over and over. Like even at the end of this film, it's like, oh, if I had been waiting for you in the saloon, the sun wouldn't have been in your eyes when you walked out. Like any advantage that you can use.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it didn't really matter.
No, it didn't do anything, but just the fact that he was thinking calculated that way.
You underestimate really cool. My squinting ability.
Now, you mentioned the movie Hang 'em High, and I'm going to put a pin in that, and we will come back to that in a later episode because that's one that you really should see. Well, let's continue on here, finish the list here. We've got number 6, which didn't quite seem like a lesson to me, but it was right bullet at the right time. Number 7 was If You Untie a Man, Take His Gun Before You Do. Meaning, take his gun, then untie him, Yeah. Because he'll just pull it on you. Number 8 was Don't Give a Man Any More Bullets than what he's got use for. And that was Scott's rule. He came up with that.
Yeah, because that took place right after the guys came and Wild Bill's guys came, and they dragged the shit out of Lee Van Cleef. Well, not Lee Van Cleef, but Lee Van Cleef's stunt double.
Right. That was brutal, though.
And you could definitely tell that they went through and removed all the rocks or any debris that might seriously injure him. Because when they rode around in the dirt around that, I don't know, maybe at one point it was a fountain or a watering hole, but it was full of hay now. And then when they ran up the hill, they took the horses up the hill, you could tell that there was a very specific path carved out, this rectangular path that they had clearly gone
cool.
over and made sure there were no rocks and no cacti, no anything that could seriously
And I think he was on a mat.
Oh,
Didn't
yeah.
It looked like he had some kind of a mat under him, sort of like Indiana Jones.
Oh, no, absolutely. But, just in case, like, they went through and you could tell, because it was like this, it's almost like when your lawn is kind of cut, and then you go through and you sort of go through it again, and like you see like the clear patterns that are cut, and like this was like this long rectangular path that was definitely wide enough for 3 horses to ride up and turn around and come back. So like they definitely made sure that they didn't they didn't have anything there that might injure the stuntman. And even like
right
afterwards, you see like how red and bloodshot Lee Van Cleef's eyes are. Like,
oh yeah,
like just from like the initial, like filming of that scene, like just that got him all, like all jacked up. Like his eyes were all messed up and everything. Yeah, and that
was cool.
It was a very nice touch. And Scott saved him and like threw his gun to him, and he was able to shoot all 3 of the guys in the back. And
right,
that's
Scott
what he's
only
like,
put 3 bullets in it.
Right, he only gave him the 3, and he told him he's like, yeah, just in case. He's like, ooh, you're learning, but like those are the last lessons that he gave him. Unless I totally missed 9 and 10.
Yep, we've got number 9, where he said, actually, Talby remembered that Scott came up with number 8, so I guess he really liked that one, or maybe it was something he was going to say. But number 9 was, there are times you have to accept a challenge or lose everything there is in life anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And then Scott learned the hard way. Number 10, I think it was Talby who also said it. At the very end, one of the last lines of dialogue, he says, when you start killing, you can't stop it.
Right. Okay, I do remember that now.
That was the hard lesson. Yeah. So I liked Scott's character arc in this movie. I think in a lot of spaghetti westerns, you don't get characters that have such an amazing arc, where he went from, like you said, this shit-slumming peon who was just, and he also had this childish sort of attitude about things. And then he kind of became, confident, gunslinger, almost arrogant. I thought he was a little arrogant at certain points, like a little cocky. And
I wouldn't
really,
say little.
like
I'd say a lot. Like,
yeah,
he absolutely like turned into the biggest jerk. Like you had what's his name there? The doctor that was after the gunfight that they had. The doctor was like tending to the guy who was shot like in the ribs. And Scott just grabbed him and like, no, you come work on my friend here first. And like, he's talking shit to the judge and calling him a bastard, and then he's go get the broom out of the back, tells the bartender, the guy that owns the saloon, it's like, the same guy who's like, we don't want your kind here. If you're gonna drink, you have to drink in the kitchen, like, and he just treated him like shit. He's like, all right, go get the broom, and he like takes the broom and like just shoots it to pieces, which was an impressive bit of shooting, because we never really saw him shoot. Even in the gunfight, he was fairly reluctant to do anything.
That's true. Yeah.
So you don't know how accurate he is.
We were told that he was a good. Yeah. I think we were told he was good, but we didn't see it till then.
Right, because it's like, you have a chocolate gun. Like, what do you... and Murph tells him, he's like, yeah, you're a fast draw, but it's like, if you're a fast draw, but like, you're off, 4 feet to the left every time, like, you're a terrible duelist.
Right. One thing I thought, and this kind of, for me, at the first time I watched it, was the turning point where I was saddened by Talby's actions here when he burns the bar and the bartender or the co-owner, I guess. That really, I was like, wait a minute, that was uncalled for, and I was like, oh no, he's going down the dark path, you know.
I'm dissolving our partnership.
I was like, there was no need to kill him.
He didn't, like, he's like, oh, I'm gonna, build my own saloon. It's like, why don't you just renovate this one? Like, it seems easier to just renovate this than burn it down and start over. I mean, like, I get the symbolism.
Yeah.
I will say...
The pillars out front of the new one are giant guns.
Yeah. I will say, like, that whole scene where he goes to the bank and he's like, oh, I want to make a withdrawal. It's like, you don't have an account here. I'm like, yeah, I got Wild Bills, or Wild Jack's.
Wild Jack.
I keep calling him Wild Bill. A little more common Western name.
Right.
He goes, I have his account. Give me, I'll take $1,000. And the banker's like, give me 1,000. And the dude just hands him money, doesn't count it. He's like, here you go. I don't know. I think that's like 1,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, and then like at least Lee Van Cleef counted it.
Right.
Let me check. Yep. Then he goes to the guy and makes him sign the thing. He's like, "Why did you just make me sign?" It's like, "Oh, a confession." It's like, "Why didn't you read it?" It wasn't like
no kidding
300 pages. It was like a single sheet of paper. But I will say, I made a note when he turns and says, a full signed confession. He's reflected in the mirror, and that's such an awesome shot.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Because he's almost at the door, and, like, he turns around, and you can only see him reflected in the mirror, and it's just so cool. I was like, oh, man.
Yeah.
We talk about impressive cinematography and, like, really great shots that, different directors put into their films. Again, we talk about this a lot, especially with the Shaw Brothers films. But this was, to me, in a very well shot, very cinematic film. This was probably my favorite shot of the film. Even the scene with the gun twirling at the end that we already discussed. This was probably just the coolest shot. Because it was so well done, and it's just like, oh, he's reflected in the mirror. Oh, it just looks so cool.
Yeah. Oh man! And so the whole scene before he torches the bar, was actually a couple scenes before that was where Talby and Owen have their what do you call it? The duel.
Yeah.
On horseback with musket rifles, no less.
And we see. Actually, no. Go ahead. Because I don't. You're probably going to touch on it.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say how amazing it was that Talby. All he had to do was have the musket ball ready in his mouth. So it's just saved him that millisecond of time when they were both loading as they're racing, that he gets his shot off like a millisecond before Owen does and is able to kill him.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, this is exactly what Murph has been talking about the entire time, like knowing the tricks. So instead of like using the like the little thing to tamp down the musket ball, he spit it down the barrel.
Yeah.
Saving himself just a couple of seconds. And those couple of seconds allowed him to win the duel. I will say, though,
that was just amazing.
We saw him, I was just thinking, I was looking at my notes, we saw him go to the doctor and get treated when he got shot in the arm. Not after he got dragged around. Like, he was covered in blood. His hands were all jacked up. His chest was shredded. Like, he was just covered in blood. And he just acted like nothing happened. And we never saw those, like, scars on his hands or anything. He was just like, yeah, I'm totally fine.
Right.
I healed on my way back
bandages
to town.
Around his... Yeah. He should have been bandaged all around his chest.
And his hands. Like, I was like, oh, that's what's going to come up later. Like, something's going to, like, he's going to be bandaged up and it's going to somehow do something. There's a scene where they're trying to get Scott, like all the remaining guys that are on the shit list there, they try to get Scott to go over to their side. And they lure him outside, with women. There's Scott thinking with his Colt 45 again. Goes outside, and he gets shot. And then you see, is it Rule 5? If you wound a man, kill him.
Right, yeah.
And the guy's like, "Oh, I'm the one that did it. I killed Scott Mary." And then Scott shoots him in the friggin' face. It's like premature. Rule number 11: premature celebration will get you killed every time.
Right.
Like that is a rule in movies. Premature celebration. Right. We've seen that in Armageddon and stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, all right, or Independence Day, where they shoot the nuke at the spaceship the first time. They're like, yeah, we got a direct hit, all right. And it's like, oh, it's still there. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have jumped up and cheered and said that we did it. Hooray.
That's so funny. But then after that, the doctor says, oh, he won't be able to shoot again.
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on. Like, you have all these guys standing around, or sitting around the card table, and they're like, well, I heard he's paralyzed. Well, I heard the doc had to take a chunk of muscle out. And I heard this. And it's like, oh, he'll never be able to light a match from 10 paces. And, the guy holds up a match, and all of a sudden there's a gunshot in it. And, not only is he not paralyzed, he's faster than he was before. It's like, wait, what? He got shot yesterday, and now he's, way better?
Yeah, he's like, well, I exercised.
Oh, I pushed myself out of bed. It's like, why would you need to push yourself out of bed with a shot in the arm? It's like one of those things we talked about on other shows. It's like, oh, I've been shot in the arm. Now I have a limp. It's like, why are you limping? Oh, he's got a cane. Why? Oh, because he got a concussion, so he's got a cane now. Like guys, got bandages all over his head, and he's walking out with a cane. It's like, why are you limping?
That's so funny. And I just thought it was interesting though, like you mentioned, with the town really. At first, I felt like they were really playing Scott by trying to get him, luring him with the girl and all that stuff. But then she kisses him, but then she refuses his advances and says, "Only till you talk to my dad." And then Murph aligned himself with, because I don't think Murph was corrupt like the rest of the town, and which was worse, these corrupt officials that are oppressing everybody and treating everybody literally like shit, or Talby, who's kind of just saying, hey, let's party it up,
Well, I think Murph's thing is, again, another trope that we've seen time and time and time again. The honorable, wise mentor sacrifices himself but leaves the last bit of information that, because he's lost his student for whatever reason. Like we saw this in Karate Kid 3. He's lost his student because the allure or appeal of this new person is so great. You're learning different things, and you think you're getting what you want, but it turns out that they've just been manipulating you the whole time. And again, Karate Kid 3 is just probably the perfect example. And the wise mentor knows that the path he's on is going to lead to his death. But he feels it's necessary because he cares for the protagonist so much that it's a sacrifice he's willing to make in order to save his protege or his student or what have you, because that's exactly what we see. Think of Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope. If you strike me down, I should become more powerful. And he did everything he did so that Luke could get away, because he knew that Luke was the key. And the mentor comes back and shows that, my way was the best way, and, we get a payoff. like, I didn't think we were going to get this payoff, but it turns out that, they talked at the beginning about how fast and how great of a gunfighter Doc Holliday was. And when he died, everybody was trying to find his gun I keep wanting to call him Ringo. Scott's like, no, it's because he was so good. It's like, yeah, but he had these tricks. Like, as you get older, you have to learn these tricks in order to survive. And, he even implores him to be like, hey, like, look at your gun barrel. Like, look at your gun. Look at this. Look at that. Compare it to his. Do you know why it's like this? Because, he does this technique and you do a different technique, and his technique is faster. So he can shoot 6 times in the time you can shoot 3. So he's twice as fast as you when it comes to firing. Like, you might be able to outdraw him, but it's going to take you longer. Like, it's going to take that fraction of a second long because your gun barrel is 2 inches longer. So it takes longer for the bullet to come out. The end of his... And it's a slight fraction of a second, but it's still a delay that he doesn't have.
Right. Because Talby sawed off the end of his gun to make it shorter so he could draw it quicker.
He can draw it quicker.
He didn't have that far to go.
And, and so the bullet also doesn't have farther to go. Although, it also, and I found this out going to a gun range, that when you shorten the barrel of a gun, it decreases the power.
Oh, right.
We shot an AK-47. Like, we shot multiple guns, but one of the guns we shot was an AK-47, and it had a shortened barrel, and the reason it had a shortened barrel was because of the nature of that weapon. It would have shot through the back wall had they not taken the end of the barrel off. So it was adjusted, but it was also a lot louder, and it didn't have as much power because there wasn't enough buildup from because when the way it works is that the firing pin strikes the back of the shell, which drives the bullet forward. So, like, it sparks the gunpowder, which propels it down, and the longer it's in a barrel, the faster the projectile is going to be. So if you cut that off, it also reduces accuracy. So there's an advantage, but there's also a disadvantage. But in this case, it's not so much of a disadvantage that it's going to affect the gun is still powerful enough to kill. Especially where he's able to draw quicker. He doesn't have as much gun to take out of the barrel, or as much gun to take out of the holster, like you said, because the barrel was 2 inches shorter. So that's a fraction of a second there. And even if you draw at the same time and you both fire at the same time, his bullet is going to come out first because he's got the shorter barrel. It's going to be slightly less accurate. But when you're, like in the scene in the bar at the beginning, when you're 5 feet away, doesn't matter.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Like, that accuracy, like, if you're 100 feet away, sure. But even the gunfight in the middle of the town, it didn't matter as much because they weren't that far away.
Yeah. It wasn't Doc Holliday's gun. There was something about it, they had modified the trigger, so you pretty much had to look at the gun and it would fire?
Yeah, the hammer. Modified the hammer.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, that was cool. And I just loved that whole thing. I thought it was funny, too, how Murph, when he hears Frank Talby's name, he's like, oh, that rings a bell. And then Frank Talby hears Murph's name, he's like, oh, that rings a bell. And they're like, oh, shit, it's that guy.
I mean, it should have rung a bell, considering that, like, he defeated him in a gunfight. I mean...
Right.
You kind of had that feeling that, like, they knew each other and that they there was a history there.
Yeah. That was I thought it was kind of interesting too how, like you said, Murph showed him other tricks of the trade, but he also saw that Talby was grooming him to take his place because Talby was an aging gunslinger. Which, of course, in real life, there was only like a 13-year difference between Gemma and Lee Van Cleef. But And he was purposely like got him the gun, even though he showed him, how to hang the holster on his hip so that he can, reach it quicker. He gave him the gun. He bought him what looked like a nice shiny new gun, and then, but it was still to kind of keep him down because, Talby's gun was much faster, like as we just described. While he was grooming him, he was still kind of keeping him at bay, so he couldn't have a chance at, confronting Talby eventually, which Talby knew was inevitable.
Right. He's hedging his bets. He's like, I know that there's an opportunity or there's a chance that, we might have a confrontation and I can't match your speed, but because I can't match your speed, I can always use these underhanded tricks.
Right.
Not underhanded, but, I can use these different tactics in order to, gain any advantage I can.
Right, exactly. I love Talby's line, too, where he's talking to one of the townspeople, and he says, he was born a wolf, you made him rabid, not me. Which was kind of true, because they pushed Scott so much at the beginning of the film that when he finally got his confidence and arrogance, he gave them shit for it.
As he earned. Like, they had treated him like he was probably, 20, like, the character's probably, 25 in this movie,
Yeah, probably about that, yeah.
So his whole life, like, that's how they've treated him. And finally he has the upper hand, and it's like, you're not going to push me around anymore. I only took it because I had no choice. Now I have a choice. Right. And not only are you going to respect me, but you're going to respect my friend here, which is why you respect me. So, like, you're afraid of him, and I've already proven that I'm, if not equal, on a level playing field.
Yeah, exactly. I think he was able to sense the fear in them once they realized his change. I think that helped. It was sort of like a cyclical where it fueled him to be more confident and arrogant, and that made them even more scared, and then he got more arrogant and confident. You know what I mean? It was like it just kept building upon itself as he was changing as a character.
Yeah, and it was all the the years of abuse and disrespect and all of that, suddenly, pulling a 180 and just being like, you know what? I have the upper hand now, and I'm going to use that to my advantage.
Right.
I'm going to treat you and make you feel as helpless and insignificant as you made me feel.
Exactly. And I thought was one of the things, too, that they were feeling was, oh, shit, we treated him like crap, and now he's powerful. What's he going to do to us,
Right, and that's the thing is like, oh, you want to apologize and respect me now because you're afraid of me, but when when you had the advantage, it's like the old saying, like, you can judge a man, based on how he treats those below him, the station below them in life, as opposed to their superiors. Like, I forget who it was. I think it was Tom Hardy. And he's like, I show the same respect to the janitor that I do the CEO.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things, too, about the theme here, well, no, not the theme, but when my vision walking into this movie or my expectation, in Death Rides a Horse, the confrontation between Lee Van Cleef's character, Ryan, and John Philip Law's character, you kind of saw that from the beginning because Van Cleef's character was going on guilt, and you knew he was part of the gang that killed, Law's family. So, but in this one, they didn't really have that kind of setup. We didn't really know what Talby's motivations were. So it took me, like I said, a second viewing to really wrap my brain around that, and then I got it. It clicked, and I loved it after that. But it was just kind of an interesting dichotomy there, where in that movie, his character, like I said, we already knew he was part of a bad gang, and he was feeling the guilt about it. But this Lee Van Cleef character doesn't quite have that. He seems like he's got morals because he doesn't like to see animals get hurt, and he seems like he's been a good guy. He helped this kid to stand up to the bullies and all that. But he was really just motivated by greed, just the money and the power, and that I think just corrupted him absolutely. No pun intended.
I will say that for a significant portion of this film, especially the way they look at each other, or the way Lee Van Cleef looks at him, looks at Scott when they first meet, I was waiting for the revelation that he's like, oh, I never knew my father, and like this stranger rolls into town. It's like, yep, there's your dad. Like, I was waiting for that.
It's funny. I didn't think of that, but I definitely could see the father-son relationship through the whole thing.
Like, it would not have surprised me because he's like, oh, what was your mother's name? Mary. Mary, eh? I once knew Mary. Like, but I was like, oh, it's generic enough that, maybe, but like, it wouldn't have seemed out of place, but it definitely would have been cliche.
Yeah, definitely. I just loved it, though. They had a really good dynamic here. And I'm going to have to look. I don't think one exists, but I still want to see a movie where Lee Van Cleef and Giuliano Gemma team up and fight bad guys together. Yeah. That would be awesome. But the whole ending was, just a Pyrrhic victory for Scott. Even though he won and he got the moral high ground to basically overcome what he was becoming, and by throwing his gun away at the end. Everybody around him was dead. I don't think, with the exception of the blind Pew or whatever his name was, the blind guy, everybody was dead, and I think it was a very Pyrrhic victory for him.
I think it was definitely a bittersweet victory because he only came around to see exactly what Murph was talking about after Murph's death. Like, Murph tried to warn him, and he was too stubborn because he liked his new lifestyle, because when he was with Murph, he was this lowly shit wrangler, and now with Lee Van Cleef, he's this, hot, he's got these fancy clothes and a fancy gun, and, he's not worried about scraping together $18 to get a gun because he's got one and he's got a horse, and, he's the right hand of the ruling class, and everyone respects it / fears him, and like does what he wants, and he can get away with whatever he wants. And
so all right, so Patsy, final thoughts on Day of Anger.
I loved it. If you have Tubi, it's on there for free. Tubi does have commercials, which is why all the movies on there are free. It's a nice restoration, but there are a couple of times where, like for a second or two, and this might have been where I missed some of the stuff, the film kind of speeds up, almost skips. It gets a little jumbled for like a second or two, and you're not sure what's going on. If you don't have Tubi, it's on Fire Stick, PlayStation, all that stuff, free, and there's thousands of movies on there. I was very excited that this was on there. I recommend watching it. Again, these are the first Westerns I've ever watched, unless you count, obviously the Magnificent Seven. But other than that, I haven't really watched Western films, not these types of Westerns, certainly not spaghetti Westerns. I've watched movies set as Westerns, Bone Tomahawk and stuff like that.
Back to the Future 3.
Yeah, those types of films. They're not straight Westerns. They're parodies, like The Quick and the Dead, which is excellent, Sam Raimi.
Yeah, and that's a great movie.
Phenomenal cast in that. But yeah, I recommend this very highly. I liked this one a lot. It's a nice bounce back from Return of Ringo.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, it took me 2 passes to really come to appreciate this film, and had to really sort of analyze it and do some research on it. But yeah, it's definitely a classic. It's just so much fun seeing Lee Van Cleef and Giuliano Gemma together in a film. They're both great, and I'm looking forward to actually seeing more movies, more Westerns with them in it, not necessarily together, but I like Gemma. I'm glad that we discovered him. I mean, I had no idea he existed until we started doing the show, and we did Pistol for Ringo. Lee Van Cleef, of course, I grew up watching him, so he was just always great. So, folks, yep, take Patsy's advice, go and see it, watch it on Tubi if you can. So, Patsy, why don't you let the folks at home know where they can find you online and all about your podcasts and stuff?
Oh, well, you can find one of the easiest things to do. Just go to throwdownthursdaypodcast.com. That has all of our latest articles, latest episodes. You can go to Throwdown Thursday Podcast on YouTube. We have a couple of different playlists on there. We have our Throwdown Thursday. I have some funny gaming moments. Some of these clips are only a couple of seconds long, and maybe they highlight a glitch or maybe they highlight something crazy that happened in the game. There's some clips from the game Maneater where you play as a giant bull shark, and it's phenomenal, and I love it. There's also a playlist has several episodes of The Loudest Sports Show, which I host along with my two brothers. Occasionally, my wife Ashes, who is also my co-host on Throwdown Thursday. She's going to be coming back more often because hockey season is now upon us, and on that show she is Slash's the Ice Queen. She's our hockey expert. And
nice.
Also, our 6-year-old niece Emma Extreme joins us to pick football games and just do extreme stuff, and be 6. Like that's what she does.
That's cool.
And yeah, you can also find me on the Dorkening Podcast Network on Indie Creator Spotlight. We just interviewed Michael Dorn last week.
Nice.
For his new movie, Agent Revelation. And yeah, and we have coming up in the near future on Throwdown Thursday, we have our interview with John Rhys Davies and his role in Grizzly 2 Revenge. So keep an eye out for that.
Excellent. And Patsy, thanks so much for sticking with me on this trek. I think it's just great fun to explore these films that, you and I pretty much both haven't seen. And thank you, dear listener, for joining us once again on this journey into Shaw Brothers movies and spaghetti westerns. You could send us your thoughts on today's episode to The East Meets the West 42 at gmail.com. And you can check out our website at havenpodcasts.com, where you can also find our sister show, Then Is Now, where we discuss all the cool stuff that you may have missed out on and stuff you should know. Folks, don't forget to go wherever you download your podcasts, and if you liked this one, please leave us a great review so that more people can find the show. And The East Meets the West podcast is now on YouTube. Yes, that's right. So just go to youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1, and you'll find all our podcasts there, plus other fun stuff. And be sure to not only hit the subscribe button, but please share it with your friends and get them to subscribe as well. So that's all the time we have today. Join us again on our next episode of The East Meets the West.
The East Meets the West is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. All clips played on the show are property of their copyright holders. All other material is copyright Jupiter Media.